Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening wherever you are, and to all our friends, colleagues, and stakeholders for sustainable development. Welcome to our forum today, No One Left Behind, Reaffirming the Philippine Commitment to Sustainable Development, in celebration of the 77th United Nations Day. This online forum is brought to you by UP-CIFAL Philippines, one of the 25 global CIFAL centers affiliated with the United Nations Institute for Training and Research, or UNITAR. I'm Daniel Marie Arnisto, Program Officer at UP-CIFAL Philippines, and I'm honored to be your host for today. United Nations Day is celebrated annually and marks the official establishment of the intergovernmental organization. This day is also to remember the purpose of UN, which is to achieve international cooperation in solving international problems to promote and encourage respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms, among others. As we all know, the Sustainable Development Goals are 17 interlinked global goals designed to be a blueprint for everyone to strive to create a sustainable and inclusive society and a future for all. With 8 years left to 2030, there is a need for multilateral and multi-sectoral engagements and to reaffirm the Philippine commitment to the SDGs. This online forum aims to highlight the Philippines' progress, challenges, and ways forward to achieving the 17 SDGs, to share plans, programs, and studies to strengthening our commitment to Agenda 2030. So without further ado, I would like to invite our first speaker to give the opening remarks, Dr. Edna Estefania A. Co. Dr. Co is a professor of public administration and the director of UP-CIFAL Philippines. She is an associate fellow of UNITAR and awardee of Champion of Migration by the International Organization of Migration, or IOM Philippines. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Edna Estefania A. Co.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Danny. Good afternoon, good morning to everyone in this virtual hall. Welcome to our session on No One Left Behind, the Philippine Commitment to Sustainable Development. Today's activity is a way of the UP-CIFAL Philippines hand-holding with you all to celebrate the United Nations Day. Thank you for joining us. 2 days ago, in a monthly meeting of the different CIFAL centers in the Asia Pacific, and through our shared WhatsApp among the rest of the CIFAL centers in Europe, the United States, and Latin America, we are pleased to share how diverse activities commemorate the United Nations Day. As we celebrate UN Day, the various CIFAL centers, all of 25 now and still growing, will reconvene in November in Honolulu, Hawaii, as a family within the United Nations Institute for Training and Research, or UNITAR, to renew our commitment to the goals of sustainable development, individually as a nation and collectively as a family of the united world. As we commemorate the UN Day and pursue the global goals, we reiterate the United Nations pledge to development and human rights, and to a meta-governance of rights and responsibilities across all levels, local, national, and global, and by all sectors. Today's discussion is focused on inclusivity. Indeed, this is about no one left behind, reaching the furthest first. As we traverse the complex realities within which development finds itself, both as opportunities and challenges, and as we discover different pathways by our diverse sectors, as we encounter fast evolving and changing technology, and even what may be complex approaches to development, sometimes in the form of adaptive and innovative strategies of the 21st century, we take caution on the so-called innovative reinvention of delivering services and our ways of doing. Let us go back to the core. Central to sustainable development is social inclusion, or people. People as they intersect with the planet to achieve prosperity through partnerships and peace through strong institutions. I plead that we keep reminding ourselves to put the farthest first so that indeed no one is left behind. Today, we expect to hear the narratives on the diverse forms of challenges on the one hand and the enormous opportunities brought to us by reinvented technology, science, and new strategies, and how each of us as stakeholders and players in development carry on in the 21st century. At this point, I reiterate that we remind ourselves on the centrality of our bottom line. Put the furthest first. I am sure we will hear from our experts and stakeholders how we put the furthest first. I invite everyone to listen to these messages and the diverse ways of inclusivity. Once again, thank you for sharing your time with us. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Ko, for highlighting the Philippine-United Nations partnership. Indeed, the Philippines has a long history together, stemming from being one of the founding members of the United Nations. We surely have a lot on our plate to contribute to the United Nations mission for peace, security, and inclusive development. Our first plenary discussion will be on the theme UN entities and progress towards sustainable development. Our moderator for this discussion will be Ms. Georgina Hernandez-Young, Executive Director of Galing Pook Foundation, an organization that promotes innovation and excellence in governance. Ms. Hernandez-Young served as spokesperson and head of Angat Buhay. She also worked at the Department of Social Welfare and Development as the Director of the Sustainable Livelihood Program. Ms. Hernandez-Young, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Danny, and greetings to, of course, Professor Edna Ko for bringing all of us together this afternoon. And I am here to moderate the first panel entitled UN Entities and Progress Towards Sustainable Development. Before we proceed, I would like to also acknowledge the presence of our participants who are here with us on Zoom, more than 100 of us here on Zoom from different parts of the country, San Jose del Monte, Bulacan. We have from Iloilo City and also different government agencies. So thank you very much for joining. And we are also live on YouTube for those who are not able to join us here on Zoom. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our esteemed guests and speakers to who will be speaking at the first plenary discussion of this online forum, which is dedicated to the sharing of UN entities in the Philippines and their progress towards sustainable development. I would like to introduce for this session our speakers, Ms. Frances Rivera from FAO, Ms. Rosaline Messina from UN Women Philippines, and Ms. Manja Vidic from the UN OCHA. And for the format, we will have 15-minute presentation from each of them. And then we invite our participants to please type in your questions in the Zoom chat, which we will pick up for the open forum discussion. Our first speaker, we will be hearing from Ms. Frances Rivera. She earned her bachelor's degree in statistics at the University of the Philippines and spent much of her early career in policy research and statistical consulting. And currently, she is the statistical analyst of the Food and Agriculture Organization. Ms. Rivera.
Hello, everyone.
Go ahead. We can hear you, and please feel free to proceed with your presentation.
So, on behalf of our FAO Philippines representative, Ms. Sheila Wertz Kanonikoff, and our assistant FAO representative for program, Ms. Tamara Palis Duran, I would like to thank the organizers of this event for inviting us here today. It's a real honor to be speaking to all of you and give an overview of our contribution as an organization to sustainable development in the Philippines. So I will just share my screen. I cannot share my screen. Ayan, ayan. Why? So first, what is FAO? No? Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations is a specialized agency, UN agency for food, nutrition, and agriculture, fisheries, and forestry. So our global vision is a world free from hunger and malnutrition, where food and agriculture contribute to improving the living standards of all and reducing inequalities in urban or rural areas, rich or poor countries, or men and women. And since 2010, all of FAO's work are guided by our new strategic framework, which was developed in the context of major global and regional challenges in the areas of FAO's mandate, including the COVID-19 pandemic. So this framework seeks to support the 2030 agenda through the transformation to more efficient, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable agri-food systems for better production, better nutrition, better environment, and better life, leaving no one behind. So these four betters represent an organizing principle for how FAO intends to contribute directly to SDG 1, no poverty, SDG 2, zero hunger, and 10, reduce inequalities, as well as to support the achievement of the broader structure of SDG agenda, which is crucial for attaining FAO's overall vision. Now, speaking of supporting the achievement of the broader SDG agenda, FAO is focused on 14 themes in support of the UN-wide process to define SDGs. So we all know that we have 17 SDGs, right? But these 14 themes cover FAO's broader mandate, not only covering areas related to food security, nutrition, and sustainable agriculture, but also rural poverty, environmental stewardship, and sustainable management of natural resources. Now, you might be wondering why only these themes or priorities are included in FAO's work in SDGs. This is because we believe that these themes capture interlinkages between food security and the targets of the SDG agenda. Furthermore, FAO supports governments to design right policies and programs to end hunger, promote food security, and promote sustainable agriculture. Aside from that, FAO is also a custodian agency to 21 SDG indicators. No, FAO is helping countries to overcome all of these challenges through developing the statistical capacity to generate, disseminate, and use national data, as well as realign their national monitoring frameworks to SDG indicators. And it is also our responsibility for leading the methodological development of these indicators, collecting data from national resources, ensuring their consistency, and disseminating them at a global level. So aside from these indicators, we are also very much engaged in supporting other UN systems projects on other SDG indicators. Now, let's look at the 2022 Philippines SDG Watch. Well, this is just a snapshot of the progress of SDGs in the Philippines, which is from the Philippine Statistics Authority, or PSA's first round of update last June 29, 2022. So 37 out of 97 targets have measurable pace of progress. 60 out of 155 indicators have measurable pace of progress, such that 18.3% of the indicators measured are on track. 53.3% of the indicators measured needs acceleration, and 28.3% of these indicators measured have regressed or have an inverse trend in terms of progress. So what do these numbers tell us? In terms of our progress in achieving SDGs, we have a lot of work to do. But we've come so far. 18.3% maintained progress is still a progress, as well as the 53.3% is still a progress, even though it needs acceleration. And even we are experiencing pandemic right now, and we have to continue, like our future depends on these goals, because it does, right? And we can choose hope over uncertainty in achieving these goals. Now, the work of FAO in the Philippines is geared to support the Philippines to achieve SDGs, which is guided by our country programming framework, or CPF, that is aligned to the global strategic framework. No? This supports the government in addressing challenges in improving food and nutrition security, enhancing agricultural production and productivity, sustainable management of natural resources, and improving agricultural adaptation from climate change and disaster risks. We are usually collaborating directly with national governments and, upon request, for support on addressing technical gaps. Now, here are some of the SDG-specific projects of FAO in supporting national governments of the countries, including the Philippines. So, strengthening the capacity for monitoring food security and sustainable agriculture in the context of SDGs 2 and 12, and improving country data for monitoring SDG achievements and informing policy decision in the context of SDG 5A.1. So this is the first one that is centered to the SDGs 2 and 12, the Technical Cooperation Program, or TCP. So the duration of this program was from April 2018 to December 2019. So this was designed to support countries in Asia-Pacific region, including the Philippines, to collect and analyze data related to the undernourishment, food insecurity, sustainable agriculture, and food loss or waste. Regional and country-level technical assistance workshops and capacity building activities targeting officials in the national planning bodies, national statistical offices, and ministries of agriculture in compiling the indicators from different data sources and improving existing data sources for more accurate and regular estimates for the monitoring of two SDGs in particular, 2 and 12. No? So the second FAO's project that supports the Philippine government is our current project on SDG 5A.1 indicator in collaboration with PSA. So this is the project that I am most proud of right now because I am currently engaged with this. SDG 5A.1 indicator assesses the gender equality situation in the country in terms of rights or tenure security on agricultural lands. So this is rooted from Target 5.A, which aims to give women equal rights to economic resources as well as access to ownership and control over land in accordance with national laws. So this project is still ongoing, but Philippines is one of the first countries that produce estimates in a simulation or a simulation setup or a pretest before the actual survey using FAO's latest methodology of this indicator. So we are conducting global webinar series in which we presented how to produce these estimates with existing data and how to integrate official methodology in existing data collections. And why are we interested in agricultural lands? Because agricultural land is a key input in developing countries and where poverty reduction and development strategies are frequently based on the agricultural sector. And we are recognizing the role of women in the agricultural development. So women could increase their productivity and empowerment if they had more access to productive resources, particularly land. So that's it from our end. And by the way, you may check our official website, www.fao.org, or you may check the provided link here regarding our plans and projects on SDG. Thank you for your attention today and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rivera, for presenting to us the FAO strategic framework, the progress towards attaining the SDGs in relation to the 21 SDG indicators that the FAO is monitoring. 8 years left to the 2030, to the Agenda 2030 in the Philippines. As you mentioned, 18.3% or 11 indicators are on track. Something for us to look into and reflect further is the regression that we have seen in the 17 indicators. Later on, we will have a discussion about these things, and perhaps also before moving forward, I would like to recognize the question that was put in the Q&A box. It was actually a comment by Ms. Vena that while we are looking at the SDG targets, there are also trade-offs and conflicts across different target indicators in the SDGs. Perhaps something that our two more speakers could speak to if they wish, or explore further in our discussion later on. We will now proceed to the second speaker, Ms. Rosaline Maria Messina, who is the country program coordinator of UN Women Philippines. Previously, she is the UN Women Philippines Program Manager for We Empower Asia, a program promoting women's economic empowerment through private sector engagement, entrepreneurship, and adoption of women's empowerment principles at various levels. She is a graduate of the University of the Philippines, and she served her alma mater as a senior lecturer on community development at the UP College of Social Work and Community Development, and as a university extension specialist of the UP Gender Office. So let us all welcome Ms. Rosaline Messina of the UN Women.
Hi, Georgina. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope I'm coming in clear.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Okay, let me share my screen, and really good to be able to follow Frances as she has presented an overview of the status in terms of the Philippines' achievement of the SDGs. Okay, let me see how I could do that. Okay, is it on slide presentation now?
Yes, we can see
Thank
the
you.
presentation.
Okay, great. So you have seen an overview of the status of the Philippines' achievement to the SDGs. My name is Lenlen Messina. I represent the UN Women as its country program coordinator, and we really would like to take this opportunity to thank UP-CIFAL and all of the different panel members who will be presenting, and of course those who are very keen to hear about the different actions we need to take to make sure we meet the target for the Sustainable Development Goals. So for this afternoon, I'd like to really cover in my 15-minute presentation the rallying call that we hope to do as UN Women to step up for actions across the different stakeholders for us to be able to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And we see that it's, gender equality and empowerment of women could really be a driver for us to be able to do this. So who we are, a lot of people does not know or does not hear about the work that UN Women does. Here in the Philippines, we are a program presence office, so our visibility and our footprint is not as much as all the other agencies, but we also see the important work and role that we are doing and that we hope to do in terms of championing women and girls, and how we can really see this as an opportunity to accelerate the progress and sustainable development. This is really an explicit goal, SDG 5, and you saw in Francis' presentation, SDG 5 has been seen as one of the indicators that regressed. I'll be sharing with you later what are the different articulations or what are the different situations why this is so in the country. But outside gender equality being an explicit goal, we see really gender equality also as an opportunity for us to make sure we are able to accelerate, drive, and attain the sustainable development in which women and girls are put at the center, and where they could really take part in, ending poverty, addressing hunger, promoting inclusive growth, building just and inclusive society, peaceful and resilient communities, and also make sure that our environment is protected, and the impact of climate change are also addressed and averted as well. So the broader mandate of UN Women are across three areas. First is in policy work. We see the work we do in terms of trying to understand how we can make sure that all relevant laws, policies are gender inclusive, gender transformative, meaning we are able to see these policies reflecting and addressing the lives and the real situations of women and girls in the country. We do this by working with different organizations, agencies, policymakers, so that we are able to deliver on it. Second area is on coordination, where we try to, as much as possible, use our mandate and the networks that we have to be able to deliver on the results of gender equality across not just the UN system, but also across the different stakeholders in the Philippines. And I'm very happy to say that UP-CIFAL is among our partners in doing this work or area. Last is in programming, where we really see that there's an opportunity for us to showcase different initiatives, this different work that could really transform and that could really help us achieve the goal of gender equality. So now on the status of women, we also that the status, the SDG 5 as an indicator have regressed, and this would really be not probably, but these are really some of the reasons why we see it. In the Philippines right now, we've slipped in terms of ranking in the Gender Equality Index. We've been regularly at the top 10, and now we've seen our rank lowest since the GEF or WEF has reported. In 2020, we see still a very small or low participation and representation of women in the parliament and even in the police force. 2021, we see continuously a huge gap of women's labor force participation. And we of course, continue to hear and we continue to see women becoming victims of gender-based violence, and a high percentage of that is experienced and or done to them by their intimate partners. More on the data and information. So we see here that in terms of leadership and governance, we still lack the number required to make a huge difference in terms of decision making and leadership in the government or a political sphere. In terms of economic leadership, we see women trying to be at the same pace in terms of management positions and middle management positions, but as women or as the roles go up, we see smaller and smaller numbers of women represented in these spaces. And you would see that in a lot of these areas or roles, women still are far more represented in areas where it's stereotypically for women: services, hospitality industry, retail, administrative, and the other areas too. We have seen latest statistics on VOW. It could seem like the numbers are going down in the last 2 years because of the pandemic. Reported numbers are going down, but we know that these numbers are down because of the limited access of women to really report or access support and seek help or file cases in general because of the limited or restricted mobility. But we also saw a huge number of women trying to access hotlines or calling hotlines for support. Just the figure on labor force participation, we've seen that it went up a bit in terms of the gap in labor force participation, but it dipped because the number of people who lost their jobs during the pandemic also increased. We'd like to see in this slide really just the space where we could see women represented in labor force. As mentioned earlier, a lot of them are in the service sector. Much of the work in the industry and agricultural and fishery sector are invisible, and we're very happy to hear about work that FAO is doing in terms of monitoring certain areas in this space. But we hope to really see more data and more information being surfaced, not just by UN entities, but by even academic institutions and research organizations for that matter. In the women, peace and security space, we have seen really that there's a lot of space for women to participate in local conflict resolution mechanisms, especially in the leadership role. Still contagiously, there's preference in terms of men in taking on governance work or leadership roles in these structures, as well as a lot of the titles really are still, given or preferably given to men. So we really see that the pandemic in the last 2 years has put the achievement of SDGs at stake, especially for women and girls. In particular, of course across the 17 SDGs, but in particular in these 5 SDG areas where we see that the decline in resources could push really women and girls into extreme poverty, and there's inadequate social protection made available. In terms of hunger, the reduction of food and inaccessibility of affordable and nutritious food for that matter is an issue. Health and well-being, particularly in the space of mental health and physical concerns. For the longest time, we know that women would always take a step back when it comes to their own personal health and well-being, and really make sure that their family members and their communities are prioritized, which is something we think is a space for us to really focus on. And then gender equality and decent work and economic growth. So where are we in terms of UN Women's work? The United Nations Women has tried to update our strategic note reflecting the realities on the ground that we need to address. And this really hopes to continuously find ways in how we can contribute to the acceleration or to the achievement of the SDGs across all of our different work areas. So here in the Philippines, we are articulating such commitment and work across 4 project areas in the women, peace and security, ending gender-based violence, promoting women's economic empowerment, and increasing or enhancing women's access to justice. So what do we hope to do or contribute in these areas or projects? In the women, peace and security space, we really support the localization of women, peace and security in areas where there are, extreme violent extremism. We also hope and continuously support women-led and gender-sensitive interventions in terms of not just prevention of violent extremism, but also conflict transformation and peace building. And we continuously would like to generate evidence in terms of new narratives where women could play a role in peace building and conflict transformation. In the space of gender-based violence or violence against women, we continuously look to support legal reforms in terms of prevention and response to VOW. We definitely push for survivor-centered services and protocols across the different areas that needs to happen in health, justice, police, and social services. We continuously offered platform for dialogues and conversations across different stakeholders, and again, the data management or data collection, which I think would really be an ongoing theme, not just for UN Women, but across all of the different UN agencies for that matter. In the women's economic empowerment space, we see the important role we play to really rally different private sector groups to make sure they are more made aware about the situation and the conditions of their women employees. We hope that they could extend support and really welcome women into the labor force by providing an enabling environment for women to be able to work and also to stay in their work. We also hope to promote gender responsive and fair ethical policy in terms of recruitment, accurate integration when it comes to migration work. And the last project area is our work on enhancing women's access to justice. And in this particular area, we see the important role that grassroots organizations play when it comes to promoting access to justice. Thus, we continuously offer training and capacity building. We work with different police and law enforcement or justice actors or stakeholders, and really try to find ways to build resilience to create just and sustainable future for women in this space. Last slide, sorry Georgina. We continue to find and really to work in building capacities and offering technical support to different agencies and organizations. We work to do policy, we try to collaborate and do policy research and advocacy work. We see the important role we need to play in terms of continuously making available platforms for conversation, representation, and collaborative actions. That's all from our end. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much, Ms. Messina, for presenting to us the status on SDG 5 on gender. And we did receive some questions that we will address later on. We invite the panelists to also take a look at the Q&A box. Some addressed to the presentation of Ms. Messina, and some also to the earlier presentation from the FAO. And now we should proceed to the third one. We're doing well with time, so keep the questions coming. We're looking forward to having a very engaging open forum right after the third presenter. We have Ms. Manja Vidic. Manja has been with the UN for 10 years, both in the field and the headquarters, working on humanitarian coordination, partnerships, strategic planning, as well as climate change issues. In January 2021, she became head of the UN Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs Philippines, UN OCHA Philippines, where she has been since 2019 as deputy head. Prior, she has been working for 5 years with OCHA Geneva on humanitarian coordination mechanisms and partnerships with the private sector. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Ms. Manja Vidi.
Hello, hi. Good afternoon, everyone. Magandang hapon. It's a true pleasure to be here. So I have a slightly different background than my colleagues, but I will share on the flags that you are using. So those alley of flags, this is actually headquarters in Geneva. And I worked in that building that's at the end of those flags for 7 years. And I have to say that for 7 years, each day when you pass this flag alley, I would each time get this warm, fuzzy moment of, how special it is to be working for the United Nations. So it's very exciting to be here. Very much thanks for the invitations. I mean, it's excellent to see so many students and friends of the United Nations, particularly in this very special week when we are celebrating the UN Day. I will build on my presentations, on the presentations of my colleagues from FAO and UN Women. So let me pull up my slides. Hopefully it works well, and I'll share the screen. Few words about OCHA and what OCHA is about. So Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. It's perhaps less known organization, and we don't directly deal with the SDGs. So we work on the humanitarian side. The similar equivalent in the Philippines would be Office of Civil Defense, so OCD. So we would be coordinating humanitarian assistance in times of emergencies. I will go into the presentation, and then I think through the presentation you will have a more detail of the type of activities OCHA does and the things that we advocate for. So I'll borrow the same slide that you've seen from my colleague from FAO. So this was coordinated before. I'll borrow that slide and zoom in actually on the status of where we are, particularly when it comes to SDG on climate change. So I'm on 13, but also number 11. I think it's important to be aware that that we are regressing on those important topics, particularly in the Philippines, which is one of the most disaster-prone countries in the world. Factors such as resilience of buildings and disaster resilience, it's not only that it's not accelerating, but it's actually regressing. And I think this is worrying for two reasons. I'll talk more about it from the perspective of leave no one behind, from the perspective of displacements. And oftentimes these are caused by natural disasters. You might have seen the latest World Risk Report, the 2022 one. This is an annual report. And in the previous years, Philippines would usually rank around number 7, number 1. But this year, when the report came out last month, Philippines is number 1 now in the world in terms of exposure and being at risk of disasters. So this is mainly because of climate change, but we all know that on top of that, we also have earthquakes and active volcanoes. So that kind of just builds up. So number 1 means like you cannot go much higher than that. And I think it's important to be aware because it has direct impact on the way you position yourself and the way the Philippines positions themselves to achieve the SDGs. So if in some SDGs, we are already in the catch-up game, it will be so much more difficult to catch up. So if we're going to continue doing the same, we're just going to continue regressing because the climate change is adding additional risk to the country. And I think the way how we respond and how we build resilience and how we adapt to climate change will affect a lot of other SDGs, including the one on UN on gender equality that UN Women was talking about, and it's something we are also looking into. And why this is important, and where does climate change affect those who are supposed to be who we are talking as left no one behind? I think the key thing is when it comes to the displacements. A lot of these people, because of those natural disasters, end up being displaced. So this is also a graphic. It's from the Internal Displacement Monitoring Center. These are kind of top countries in terms of displacement in 2021. So you see that these are absolute numbers. And in absolute terms, the first one is China, with roughly 6 million displacements last year. and China, we know, has 1 billion people. But then the second one is Philippines, and with roughly 5.7 million displaced last year. And it's, in terms of population, it's a 10% of what China would be. So I think this is important in the context of both climate change and LNOB, leave no one behind. It's a loss, I think, primarily in terms of human capital as well, and human potential, because we know that displacement disrupts the IDP, so internal displaced people, and host communities as well. It decreases, it's a shock for the housing conditions, it's a sudden shock for health, security, livelihoods, it affects education. And I think it's also kind of affects, of course, the local economies, opportunities to earn an income, pay rent, pay taxes, buy goods and so forth, and particularly to invest in the socioeconomic development. So I think a lot of these displacements are one-off, so people would be displaced and they would return in a few days. But nevertheless, a lot of this is just a huge disruption to people's life, and this is happening very, very regularly. There was a single event last year, and I'll talk more about this throughout the presentation, which was the Typhoon Rai or Typhoon Odette, which hit the Philippines. But before that, let me also focus on just a snapshot. For example, in addition to natural disasters, a lot of it is also man-made conflict, particularly in Mindanao. We still have a significant number of people who are displaced because of conflict in Marawi, which just celebrated the 5th anniversary, and roughly 84,000 people continue to be displaced. And a lot of those are becoming now forgotten displacements. It's not on people's mind. People are unaware that such a significant number of people are displaced, and these people are indeed at risk to be left behind, further and further behind. A lot of people are also displaced after every disaster. Most people would preemptively evacuate, but then return to their homes. But after every disaster, we have this long tail of people who will unfortunately not return for a long time. I mean, just an example, we had a Cotabato series of earthquakes in Cotabato in 2019. So approximately 10,000 people out of those who were displaced at the beginning of earthquakes are still displaced. And there is a long kind of forgotten emergencies in many other parts of Mindanao, but also in other parts of the country. But let me focus more now, particularly on this one displacement last year that happened because of Typhoon Rai and Typhoon Odette. And I think this is very alive for everyone, as we are now also monitoring the Typhoon Paeng, which has entered the Philippine area of responsibility. And you will also see the type of work that my organization does, but even more other humanitarian partners who we are working with. So last year, 16 December, Typhoon Rai, which was kind of one of the biggest typhoons that hit the Philippines in the last several years, affected about 12 million people, and over 3 million people were displaced, or they remain displaced in the initial weeks. So these are people who were not only preemptively evacuated, and there was a significant number of damaged houses as well. Why this is important? Because damaged houses mean that people will not return for a long time to their homes. And a lot of areas, of course, were affected. It was not just one particular region, but it went across, and Typhoon Rai even hit the Palawan, which is usually unaccustomed to be hit by typhoons. We got a lot of questions. How does Typhoon Rai compare to Super Typhoon Haiyan? Because I think that in the living memory of Filipinos, yourself for sure included, would remember Typhoon Haiyan. I think in terms of lives lost, of course, it cannot be compared. Luckily, the numbers were much smaller. It was about 400,000, a bit over 400 people who lost their lives. And I think it was because of important lessons learned that the government learned since Haiyan, and I think just putting a lot of emphasis on preemptive evacuations. But with over 2 million houses either destroyed or damaged, that nevertheless means there was a significant impact on human lives. These are the people who could not immediately return back to their homes after a disaster and needed extensive assistance for months, or some of them even for years, to be able to return. And in that sense, it was higher, much higher than Haiyan. Haiyan was 1.1 million houses damaged or destroyed. With Super Typhoon Rai, we are really talking about almost double that number. I think what I want to focus now on is that what we are doing. So the UN country team and the humanitarian country team with other humanitarian partners, we are supporting the government-led response in cases of big natural disasters such as Typhoon Rai, when the government is risked to be overwhelmed. So for this particular disaster, we mounted a significant response. We're bringing together over 200 organizations, so the UN agencies, but then working hand in hand with international NGOs, with Philippine Red Cross, with local NGOs, private sector, faith-based associations. What you see online is just a snapshot of the activities we did, and also along which clusters. Particularly important here was the WASH cluster, the shelter cluster. This was very much a shelter emergency because of so many houses were destroyed. A lot of it also focused on food security, protection concerns, health, nutrition. So all this is linked with the SDGs. And because the Philippines is such a disaster-prone country, each time a typhoon occurs, we are kind of at risk of sliding further down on a lot of this SDGs. This is a snapshot of the activities we did from December until June, or even some of those activities still continue. And this is together with the government. So this is in support of the local government authorities and the national government authorities. Of course, such activities cannot be done without additional support from the donors. I think this also needs to be recognized. We issued a humanitarian needs and priorities document, which was the response plan, with a funding requirement of $169 million. And in the 6 months, we got that appeal about 46% funded, with the biggest contributions coming from US, European Union, SURF. SURF is my own organization. It's part of OCHA, and then a few other contributions from Japan, Australia, and so forth. So I think it needs to be recognized that such response cannot be mounted without additional support from friends of the countries who are friends of the Philippines. Most of that funding went to cash response. So these were multi-purpose cash interventions, but then also shelter, because there was such a significant needs in shelter and food security. It was also still a pandemic was going on. We had this spike of Omicron in January, so WASH and health were also important clusters with very important interventions. Okay, let me go on the next slide. So these are some of the achievements of what has happened and how many people were reached in total. We reached over 1 million people with the assistance that the donors provided, and with activities we implemented. And you might ask, what's the role of OCHA in all of that? So we are the one who is coordinating, so to ensure that all these actors who are doing their interventions are coordinated, are responding within with same interventions and the coordinated response plan. That's our job. And at the very top, you will see a timeline. So the initial response plan was launched on 24 December. And we continued, of course, working throughout the holiday period, and then all the way until June. And then, of course, such activities then change from response to early recovery. And in doing these interventions and in doing early recovery activities, it's important to keep in mind the SDGs and to continuously strive to work for the SDGs and to work for that agenda, because otherwise all these people who are displaced would be further left behind. There are still some people who continue to be displaced. Our interventions focus primarily, we could not cover everything, but geographically, our interventions focused on Caraga, Southern Leyte, and Bohol. So these are the areas where we had to focus on. What is equally important when we work with those people who we say leave no one behind, those most vulnerable people, it's also important that you work directly with them so that you don't assume what they want, but you consult with them. So these are some of the attempts of how we consult with local communities. It's important to ask them for their opinion. What are their needs? What do they want? How satisfied are they with what they're achieving? So we continuously, every month, we were doing, for example, such bulletins to understand what are people's requirements, what do people want. And I think this applies in general for this response, but I think also in general, we kind of should not assume that this most vulnerable people or leave no one behind category, as we tell them, is someone who is kind of needs to be assisted. I think they have to be made more resilient and they have to be empowered, and they are the actors of their own destiny. They have to be seen as an agent of their own future. So I think they have to be very much at the center of all our activities and what we do. And in those consultations, you also have to look at it with a gender lens, to particularly focus in your focus group discussions on women, on people with disabilities, on children, on elderly. So we are like, even within those who are displaced, we are trying to zoom in and give assistance to those we think are the most vulnerable and would have difficulties coming back and bouncing back into the recovery. Then also, and now this is my last slide, some of the government policies, for example, in the immediate aftermath of the disaster, we need to be aware that some of the government policies also have implications on people. And it's not just a technical decision. And one of them is, for example, the no-build zone policy. And this is an example of the advisories or the activities and advocacy we then build around the activities that have impact on those people who are further left behind. For example, no-build zone policies prevented a lot of people to return back to their homes. They were not communicated clearly where they're supposed to go, where their new homes will be. The temporary shelters that was designed for them or was kind of assigned to them a few months later was not close to their livelihoods. It was far away from city proper. So they felt like even more left behind. They lost their home, and the new areas that were designed were even further left behind. So I think this is also important that the communities are involved when we organize, when we try to design the solutions and shelter solutions for them who are kind of trying to find their new life after a disaster. So I'll stop here, but perhaps just a summary. I think it's still, of course, when it comes to SDGs, a lot of work still needs to be done. And we are even regressing in some, and I think the critical work needs to be done, because if we continue on climate change, even if we do the same activities we've always done, we will be lagging behind because of the climate change, because the target is moving in a ways, right? So we need to get better to even stay on the same level of where we are, and we see that that particular SDG is just kind of slipping further and further down. I think also the category of leave no one behind shouldn't be seen as someone who is helpless, and people who they're vulnerable, but they should also be recognized as someone who is has human potential, and we are losing a lot by not addressing their needs and not empowering them to be agents of their own change and their own future. And I think more on the macro level and the policy level, I think it's really important that as the government of the Philippines prepares the new development plan, it's really important that SDGs remain at the front and center of how the Philippines is going to develop moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Manja, and for pointing out and opening our eyes to the alarming data that Philippines is #1 in the World Risk Report, something that hopefully could rally people to work together on building resiliency in our communities. And also for the last slide on the second to the last, which I really think is so important, the role of communities in rebuilding, but also in improving disaster mitigation and preparedness to ensure that communities are well prepared for what they call the new normal, the better normal. And with your work in OCHA as a coordinating body of all the humanitarian response, intersectionality also came out a lot. And so I think as we bring in the our friends from FAO, UN Women, and yourself, we could speak to the intersectionality of these issues and topics on climate change, poverty and hunger, and displacement. But before we leave your particular talk, I think I was particularly struck on the phrase that you used on forgotten displacements. It's so easy in the Philippines, you move one disaster to another, man-made or natural disaster. 5 years since Marawi siege took place, and the many families are still not back into their permanent homes. So these forgotten displacements are something that we should reflect upon and ensure that is immediately addressed and will be avoided in the future. So I think at this point we can bring in our first two speakers to join Manja on this virtual stage for our open forum. We have Ms. Frances Rivera from the FAO, Statistical Analyst, and also Ms. Rosalind Messina, Country Program Coordinator of UN Women Philippines, and Ms. Manja Vidic, Head of Office of UN OCHA. And for those who just joined us, this is Plenary Discussion 1, entitled UN Entities and Progress Toward Sustainable Development. And this time, if you look at the Q&A box, many of your questions have been answered. So please do spend some time to take a look at that. And we will be going through some of your questions as well. And if would anyone, Frances or Rosaline or Manja, would any one of you like to add anything from the Q&A box?
For me,
Go ahead, Frances.
so I think one of the things I'd really like sort of encourage everyone to think about is the SDGs are based on that kind of principle of shared endeavor and individual action as well. So maybe just taking a kind of one thing that you could do off the back of today's webinar, and to kind of start the conversation wherever you work or whatever you're doing, whether that's studying or anything, about how the SDGs may be relevant to you as an individual. So today we had a really good and deep dive issues into the SDGs, and now you've attended today's webinar, and we're all SDG advocates now as well. So I'll be really excited to hear what actions you may be able to take away. I think the more that we talk about the SDGs, the more that we think about how they relate to us. And there's a real opportunity there to kind of further build that awareness and increase the momentum further. So I think we can all play a role, whatever capacity and whatever we're doing.
Thank you, Frances. To all of our speakers, there's a question from Maria Cecilia Medina. How can researchers, students, and academics support responses to disasters and climate change? How can coordination with academic institutions be strengthened for collaborative work with UN agencies on SDGs? Perhaps Manja would like to respond, but also inviting Rosalind and Frances. Manja.
Yeah, okay, let me start. I think there are perhaps two ways that I can immediately see. I think one is to keep us, to keep the Philippine Statistic Authority calculate, where we even are, because this is sometimes keeping track of all the indicators. It's not an exact science, but I think somehow finding out best methodology to ensure that we measure properly those indicators, and then communicate this widely and use this in our advocacy campaigns when we are regressing. I think this needs to be communicated, because some of those, I'm sure perhaps this status was a surprise to all of you, right? I think we're not kind of regularly following up on the status where we are in terms of the indicators. And I think the other thing is, when we haven't put enough attention, perhaps because we don't have capacity, is like, what is at risk, or like trying to build case studies of, like, if not addressing those SDGs, like what is at risk, what are the opportunity costs? No, like not addressing one particular SDG, let's say maternal health, like what are the losses? What does this mean in terms of human capital, human potential, social costs to the Philippines? And I think you can do a lot of like case studies on each of the SDGs. And what would you gain by investing $1, or like what you gain back? And then what is the loss of not investing? I think this would bring it very real to any even economists, to understand why it makes sense to invest in SDG and in humanity indeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Manja. For Rosalind, perhaps similar to that, but adding the question of Mark, how can we foster DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion in the current paradigms of disaster and risk management?
Yes, first I echo Manya's call in terms of really ensuring that we, as much as possible, use the data that we have. In the academic community and the researchers, we'd like to really see a more vibrant research and academic community that utilizes this data and offer analyses that could really forward more concrete actions and really encourage stakeholders and those who are accountable to really make sure that the work, the programming is according to what is the reality on the ground. Earlier in my presentation, we continuously request really the generation of data and gender disaggregated data for that matter. And this is where DEI also comes into play, not just in disasters, but I think it's so important right now that we have this lens in terms of the disaster and climate change issues. But across the different work areas, we need to understand what are the nuances in terms of the impacts of these issues to women, girls, older people, people with disabilities, because this also would make a difference in terms of how we would address the problem and how we could offer support and actions. I would like to go back to Ben's question, which I think could relate to also the DEI question, in terms of what habits and actions can we do individually to support the achievement of SDGs. And this is really very, very mindful and conscious effort to make sure we try to understand the realities and the situation of different communities, and we don't generalize, we don't think, or we don't contend with what we see in the news, but we try to ask the difficult questions and also try to take a step, try to offer a step further in reaching out to the most vulnerable communities. An example for us at the UN Women, when the pandemic hit, there's really a lot of different activities that we could have done face to face, so we had to do it virtually. But we know that a lot of the women in the communities would not have access to internet connectivity, or even laptops for that matter. So what we had to do is reach out to our partners at the community level and see if there's a way for us to offer loads or mobile phone vouchers, just so they could log in their own mobile phones and participate and contribute into the discussions and conversations, because it's really tough for them to go out and participate or attend the events. So those small actions, I think, when put together, could make a big difference. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rosalind, and really pointing out the multi-layered realities of vulnerabilities among women, even children, elderly, PWDs that Manya also spoke to in her presentation earlier. Ms. Frances Rivera, I've seen Vena's question twice, and I want to bring it up again. Vena said that she attended SRI 2021 and 2022. It seems like all, if not most countries are really not on track for 2030. But the question in particular for the Philippines that she would like to ask is how we could possibly work together to acknowledge and address the conflicts or trade-offs among the different SDG targets or indicators that we are seeing. Is there an effort to work across the different SDGs and see which might negatively impact the other and how we could prevent such situations? But yeah, Francis.
Well, of course, one of the biggest criticisms of the agenda is that it's so far-reaching, it's so comprehensive, it's hard to prioritize and know what is the most important. But, well, the SDGs are known to be universal. And this means that this plan applies to the richest countries as it does to the poorest countries. And we all have a stake in their success, in the success of these goals. And you can start with yourself. You can raise awareness with your networks. You can volunteer on an issue that that you care about, and let us hold our leaders accountable for following through on their commitments as public servants. So I like this because it creates more of a community approach and a collective effort, in delivering the agenda. So.
Thank you, Francis. I myself would like to bring up a question to any of our panelists. One such crisis that has been so pervasive in the Philippines is the issue of stunting. And while some people would put it under SDG 2, it really requires the collective effort across different sectors and also across the different SDGs. So perhaps from your standpoint, how could your agencies contribute to addressing this issue on stunting that is really a crisis and that has a long-term effect on the future of our country, as it affects the children 5 years and below, and as the UN, World Food, and even FAO would point out, the effects of this is irreversible. So if anyone would like to address.
So for our organization, we are focusing on food security for all. So I've mentioned our betters, four betters. So better production, better nutrition, better environment, and better life. So for the better nutrition, it aims to end hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition in all its form, including promoting nutritious food diets and access to healthy diets. So to promote inclusive growth and economic growth by reducing inequalities in terms of gender, urban or rural areas, and etc. So these four betters represent our core as an organization and organizing principle for how FAO intends to contribute to food security for all.
Thank you. At this point, we do have a few minutes left in our session. Still related to that topic, but trying to demonstrate the systems approach to this. One thing that we see in the topic of stunting is not just on food security, but also on women's health, adolescent sexual reproductive health. So perhaps Ms. Rosalyn could speak to the impact of the pandemic. They say that I do not have the data, but perhaps you could share from your perspective on the topic of teenage pregnancies, and because they are the ones typically also at risk of uh, this issue continuing to persist.
Yes, thanks, Georgina. Actually, women really play a central role in the issue of, nutrition and food production as well. And we like to highlight how important it is for women to have continuous access to affordable, nutritious food, and really grateful for different organizations and FAO in making sure that really these are addressed as well. On teenage pregnancy, this could really, I would say, UNFPA could also speak to this when we have another forum, but really it's an issue that we need to tackle, not just because it would affect, our, how do you say, our demographics in terms of labor force participation in the future. We see that a lot of these girls, when they get pregnant early on, they miss out to complete their school studies. That limits their opportunity to access and to be able to work and also become very vulnerable members of the society, which I think really requires more deeper conversation in terms of access to reproductive health and sexual health services for that matter. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And this might be the last one that we will pick up from the Q&A box addressed to Ms. Vidic. I brought the issue of, this is from Susanita Tesiorna. I brought the issue of no-build zone in interagency meetings I conducted for Typhoon Rai or Odette interventions. I discovered the no-build zones posted in anywhere off Siargao, the most hit area in Caraga. What can you advise us in terms of intervention?
Yeah, it's a sensitive topic for sure, but it affects many people who, in the aftermath of disasters are already very vulnerable, and then the fact that this policy is enforced, it makes them even more vulnerable. I think our approach from what we've seen, and it's kind of seems to be somehow working, it's to be constructive, right? I think it's easy to fall into the criticism of the government and the established laws, but that will not get us very far. I think kind of constructive engagement with the government, advocacy at various levels. So we've done with, like, for example, that was a blueprint of a few key messages that I shared, is the engagement we've done at the national level with the key departments, but then all the way down to regional and local levels. So and that's something we do as the UN and the humanitarian country team. But I think it's also important that we advocate for the needs that those who are displaced and who live in the no-build zones are consulted, and then that the solutions that are developed for them or the temporary transitional shelter developed for them is basically also designed by their needs. We've done in the aftermath of a death. The UN agencies, they've done a couple together in a joint project. They've done a couple of these like really good examples of transitional shelters where those IDPs themselves were participants in designing the way how the houses would look like, where the street would be, where the roads would be, where kind of the windows would be on their house. We also worked with TESDA, who kind of we taught them how to build those houses, but then also TESDA certified them. So they are now certified carpenters, and they know how to repair their houses, their neighbors' houses, but also any other houses. So it kind of, doing it, it is a tragedy, but it can also be seen as an opportunity. And if you present to people this other shelter where they're going to move, the transitional shelter, as a kind of good opportunity for them, I think, and if they are included in the consultation process and then the design of their new home, I think they kind of have a much better chances of coping with the new situation. But it's a lot of tact and diplomacy that needs to be involved, and there's no one size fits all solution. But I think it needs to be really contextualized to the disaster and then the area and situation. And you might remember that the debt response, to a large extent, was also happening in times of elections. No, so it was a very sensitive area.
Thank you very much, Fania. And I think what we are able to gather from this first plenary discussion is that while we are lagging behind on some of the indicators, there are also pockets where we are moving forward, and we need to learn from the good practices that we are seeing in terms of achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. We looked at it from a national macro perspective, but there are actually some localized SDG initiatives also. Cities like Quezon City even has their own SDG office, Sustainable Development Office. We talked about Typhoon Odette and Siargao. In the second panel, we will actually hear from Mayor Coro of Del Carmen, Surigao, who did a lot of preventive work to improve the resiliency. I might end up pitching too much for him, but we know that the work of Del Carmen in terms of mangroves that really protected their area at the onset of Typhoon Odette. So perhaps we could hear to that also later on. But I think the importance also of bringing together stakeholders across different sectors, the public sector, the national, the local, as well as the legislative branches. There were some questions to that from Susanita here in the Zoom chat, and also stakeholders from private sector, civil society, grassroots organization, and even organizing the IDPs in the planning and development of rehabilitation plans, bringing in the voices so that we can ensure that we are inclusive and that we are empowering in our journey towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals Agenda 2030, 8 years to go. There has been some progress, but there is much more work to be done. So we will continue on working together, understanding the situation and finding better ways of achieving these goals. Thank you very much, Ms. Frances Rivera from the FAO, Ms. Rosalyn Messina from UN Women, and also Ms. Mania Vidic from the UN OCHA. And we will be pausing for a 5-minute break. And we hope to see you all in 5 minutes. So there's a brief coffee break for 5 minutes, and the plenary session number 2 will start at 2:35 p.m.
Yes, that truly has been a wonderful discussion between our representatives from the UN entities in the Philippines. Thank you again for accepting our invitation and for joining us today in our first plenary discussion, Ms. Frances, Ms. Lenlen, and Ms. Mania. Before we start our second plenary discussion, as mentioned by Ms. Georgina, let us have a 10-minute coffee break. We shall reconvene and see each other again at 2:40. After 10 minutes, we hope you stay with us to see the presentations of our second plenary speakers. Again, we will reconvene after 10 minutes at 2:40 p.m. See you later. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
The United Nations member states have adopted the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, a universal and transformative plan of action for people, planet, and prosperity, including 17 Sustainable Development Goals to be reached by 2030. How can such ambitious goals be achieved? Community participation, local action, and leadership will be crucial. It depends on you. Localizing the agenda means integrating the SDGs in the design, implementation, and monitoring of local development policies and plans, while putting territories in the center. Local and regional governments and other local actors are crucial to ensure the process is inclusive and accountable. Their local knowledge is essential to make the 2030 Agenda a reality for all. To provide support in implementing and monitoring the SDGs, 3 partners are gathering these experiences from across the globe to form a unique toolbox of practices and instruments. The online platform offers an interactive space to access these resources, adapt them, and achieve dependable results. You can discover practical tools that will guide you through the SDG local implementation process. Design enabling frameworks and strengthen your capacities. A library with a wealth of complementary material is also at your disposal. Upload your documents and tools and help pool our collective knowledge. Along with this, you can share your stories, engage in discussions, promote events, and connect with peers. The platform is dynamic, evolving, and your contributions are vital. Participate now and start transforming the global goals into real local actions. The United Nations member states have adopted the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, a universal and transformative plan of action for people, planet, and prosperity, including 17 Sustainable Development Goals to be reached by 2030. How can such ambitious goals be achieved? Community participation, local action, and leadership will be crucial. It depends on you. Localizing the agenda means integrating the SDGs in the design, implementation, and monitoring of local development policies and plans, while putting territories in the center. Local and regional governments and other local actors are crucial to ensure the process is inclusive and accountable. Their local knowledge is essential to make the 2030 Agenda a reality for all. To provide support in implementing and monitoring the SDGs, 3 partners are gathering these experiences from across the globe to form a unique toolbox of practices and instruments. The online platform offers an interactive space to access these resources, adapt them, and achieve dependable results. You can discover practical tools that will guide you through the SDG local implementation process. Design enabling frameworks and strengthen your capacities. A library with a wealth of complementary material is also at your disposal. Upload your documents and tools and help pool our collective knowledge. Along with this, you can share your stories, engage in discussions, promote events, and connect with peers. The platform is dynamic, evolving, and your contributions are vital. Participate now and start transforming the global goals into real local actions.
We can be.
We must be
the first generation
to end extreme poverty.
The generation
most determined
to fight injustice and inequalities.
The generation that saves the planet from climate change.
And this is how it will get done. The global goals.
A 15-year plan
For everyone. Everywhere.
With no one left behind.
We will live in a world
where nobody
anywhere lives in extreme poverty.
Where no one
goes hungry.
where no one wakes in the morning
Asking if there will be food today.
We will live in a world where no child has to die of
diseases we know how to cure. And where proper health care
is a lifelong right for us all.
We will live in a world
where everyone
goes to school. And education gives us the knowledge
and skills
for a fulfilling life.
We will live in a world where all girls and all women have equal opportunities
to thrive
and be powerful
and safe.
We cannot succeed if half the world is headed back.
we will live in a world
where all people can get clean water
and proper toilets
at home, at school, and at work.
We will live in a world where
there's sustainable energy for everyone.
Heat, light, and power for the whole planet.
Without destroying the planet.
We will live in a world at work
economies prosper.
And new wealth
lead to decent jobs
for everyone.
And we will live in a world
where our industry,
our infrastructure, and our
Best innovations
are not just used to make money, but to make all our lives better.
We will live in a world where prejudices and extremes of inequality
Are defeated.
inside our countries,
and between different countries.
where people live in cities and communities
that are safe, progressive,
and support everyone who lives there.
where we replace
What we consume. Planet where we put back what we take out of the earth.
We live in a world that is decisively rolling back from climate
change,
where we restore and protect the life in our oceans and seas.
will restore and protect
Life on land,
The forests.
animals,
The earth itself.
with peace between and inside countries.
Where all governments are open.
And answer to us for what they do at home and abroad.
And the justice rules.
with everyone equal before the law.
Where all countries and we their people.
Work together.
Partnerships of all kinds.
To make these goals a reality.
These are the United Nations global goals
For sustainable development.
Let's get to work.
We can be.
We must be the first generation
To end extreme poverty.
The generation
Most determined.
to fight injustice
and inequalities.
The generation that saves the planet from climate change.
and this is how it will get done. The global goals
A 15-year plan
for everyone, everywhere.
with no one left behind.
We will live in a world
Where nobody
anywhere lives in extreme poverty.
Where no one
goes hungry.
Where no one.
Wakes in the morning
asking if there will be food today.
We will live in a world where no child has to die.
Diseases we know how to cure.
and where proper health care
is a lifelong right for us all.
We will live in a world where
everyone goes to school
And education gives us the knowledge
and skills
for a fulfilling life.
we will live in a world where all girls and all women have equal opportunities to thrive
And be powerful.
and safe.
We cannot succeed if half the world is held back.
We will live in a world
where all people can get clean water.
And proper toilets at home.
at school
And at work.
We will live in a world
where there is sustainable energy for everyone.
heat, light, and power for the whole planet.
without destroying the planet.
We'll live in a world where economies prosper.
And new wealth
Lead to decent jobs
For everyone.
And we will live in a world
where our industry,
Our infrastructure, and our
Best innovations
Are not just used to make money, but to make all our lives better.
We will live in a world where prejudices and extremes of inequality
Are defeated.
inside our countries,
And between different countries.
where people live in cities and communities
that are safe, progressive,
and support everyone who lives there.
where we replace
What we consume. Planet where we put back what we take out of the earth.
We live in a world that is decisively rolling back from climate
change,
where we restore and protect the life in our oceans and seas.
will restore and protect
Life on land,
The forests.
animals,
The earth itself.
with peace between and inside countries.
Where all governments are open.
And answer to us for what they do at home and abroad.
And the justice rules.
with everyone equal before the law.
Where all countries and we their people.
Work together.
Partnerships of all kinds.
To make these goals a reality.
These are the United Nations global goals.
For sustainable development.
Let's get to work.
Welcome back to the online forum, No One Left Behind, Reaffirming the Philippine Commitment to Sustainable Development. We first heard the progress and updates from our UN entities in the Philippines. Let us now hear from our stakeholders at the domestic level, whose efforts and contributions to sustainable development should be celebrated and highlighted. The theme of this panel discussion is Stakeholders for Sustainable Development. The second plenary discussion will be moderated by Mr. Mark Jacinto, curator at the online SDG Youth Action Forum, which is an online youth community with over 26,000 members aiming to bridge the young leaders and youth organizations to contribute to the SDGs. Mr. Jacinto, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening to all of our attendees to, of course, the UP-CIFAL No One Left Behind, reaffirming the Philippine commitment to sustainable development. Of course, thank you so much. And this plenary discussion is dedicated to the conversation with various stakeholders at the different sectors for sustainable development. A while ago, we focused more of the international, but now we're putting it into localized context. So again, I am Mark Jacinto, and I'm pleased to be your moderator for this session. So I'm currently the creator of the online SDG Youth Action Forum. It's one of the online communities I've started during the pandemic, which aims to share opportunities to young leaders and help them advance the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And at the same time, I'm currently the club secretary of the Rotary Club of Midtown Quezon City, one of the clubs of Rotary International District 3780, which is one of the one city, one district in the whole world. So I am honored to be here, and I would like to introduce, of course, our representatives from different stakeholders for this session. So first, of course, we will be starting with Ms. Melissa Vergel de Jos, the Chief Sustainability Officer of PLDT Incorporated. Next is Ms. Rebecca Malay, the Steering Committee Member at the Asia Civil Society Partnership for Sustainable Development. Third is, of course, Dr. Philip Arnold Juanyo, the Dean of the Ateneo School of Government and former Sustainable Development Solutions Network Philippines Country Manager. And last, but definitely not the least, Honorable Alfredo Coro II, the Municipal Mayor of Del Carmen, Siargao Island. Okay, so now, of course, we'll be starting first with Ms. De Jos. So to start the discussion, we will be hearing from Ms. Vergel de Jos. So Ms. Melissa B. Vergel de Jos, Chief Sustainability Officer of PLDT and SMART, and also the Investor Relations Head of PLDT, has been with PLDT since May 2001 and has held various positions, including Property and Facilities Management Center Head. Prior to joining PLDT, she held various positions in the San Miguel Group of Companies, where she started her professional career. Ms. Vergel de Jos obtained her Bachelor of Science degree in Marketing and Management and Bachelor of Arts degree in Economics from Assumption College. Let's give a round of applause to Ms. Vergel de Jos.
Hi, thanks. Good afternoon to all. PLDT is actually very honored to be invited and to participate today to share highlights of our sustainability journey, which we hope will contribute to the global call for sustainable development. So allow me to start. At PLDT, we recognize our key role in the Philippine economy in connecting people to knowledge, and people to opportunities through ICT, positioning technology and connectivity to accelerate all of the 17 SDGs. We will continue to use that position and voice to drive awareness and action as responsible stewards of the planet for the next generation, enabling our shared tomorrow today. The PLDT Group sustainability journey has a long way to go, but we have made great strides from a nice to have to a need to have, aiming to continue to integrate ESG in our business operations and our culture. With the support of the PLDT board, led by our chairman, Mr. Pangilinan, and our president, Al Panlilio, actually identified sustainability as one of the key performance drivers of our vision and of our strategy. This afternoon, we hope to show you what's possible and what we've been doing to build on the possibilities. We will unpack our vision, mission, and progress in building a digital future where no one is left behind. First, I'd like to thank UP-CIFAL Philippines, who actually played a big part in our recently held Sustainability Week celebration. They conducted an online orientation entitled SDGs for Transformational Business, which actually had a fantastic turnout. A total of 1,440 employees participated, which according to our employee engagement team is record-breaking considering it's virtual, it is not an entertainment theme, there was no celebrity and no fanfare. Just the SDGs and what they mean for the business. So aligned with our aspiration to become the leading ESG telco in the region, Our sustainability efforts focus on managing our impact and creating positive value for people and the planet, value that transcends our traditional role of providing connectivity. With our customers as the North Star and malasakit to guide our actions, we aim to maximize our contribution to the UN's efforts to achieve the SDGs. By embedding sustainability in our corporate DNA and in our day-to-day operations, we show our commitment to continue to grow responsibly, meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet theirs. In the same way that PLDT was one of the first Philippine corporates to integrate corporate governance within our organization, our purpose, and our processes, PLDT is one of the pioneers in sustainability in the Philippines. In the same year that the Sustainable Development Goals came into force, which was in 2016, our company also published on a voluntary basis our first sustainability report that covered 2015. Years ahead of the Securities and Exchange Commission requirement for publicly listed companies to submit their sustainability reports. So we're proud to say that PLDT had an early start in making sustainability commitments. In 2020, we began evaluating our processes and looked deeper into our impacts to define our path in pursuit of sustainable growth. Through a materiality assessment workshop, we were able to identify the issues most material to the business from the lens of our various stakeholders. The results of the assessment provided us with a guide to build the roadmap for PLDT sustainability transformation. Anchored on the SDGs and the Philippine Development Plan, our sustainability pillars define our growth and progress moving forward, showing how we are to operate our business responsibly. This means not only offering products and services with positive social impacts, but also reducing the environmental impacts of our own operations, caring for our workforce and local communities, and simply doing business right. All these pillars are interconnected to establish a stronger foundation in attaining a better future for both people and planet. While we have initiatives that address all the 17 SDGs, the key priority SDG where we can make the most impact is SDG 9. Industry, innovations, and infrastructure. I think it's worth pointing out the critical role that telcos played during the pandemic. Even this call today via Zoom is supported by telco connectivity. While there may still be room for improvements in the country's connectivity infrastructure, a big part of continuing to work, study, and survive during the pandemic was enabled by connectivity. Recognizing the enabling role we play as a telco, we continue to make significant investments in the network to ensure that we enable the economy and reach the unconnected. With our customers as our North Star and user experience as among the top priorities, we strive to provide customers not only with connectivity, but a safe online environment that enables them to work, learn, earn, be entertained, and stay in touch. PLDT's digital transformation strategy anchors on a two-pronged mission to deliver quality customer experience and do business responsibly. This translates to continuous investments in our mobile and fiber network and digitalization of service delivery process, while also managing impact and creating value for the organization, the communities where we operate, and the lives we touch. Such a strategy allows the company to narrow the digital divide for the Philippines, enable digital inclusion for Filipinos, empower customers to thrive in the digital economy, and contribute to global goals for sustainable development. In the areas of corporate citizenship, we have initiatives to reach out to marginalized communities in order to include them in the economy. We have a school in a bag program, which are portable digital classrooms for remote communities so that no learner is left behind. SMART also has a digital farmers program teaching small-scale farmers to use digital tools to expand market for their produce. Under this ladderized capacity building program, focus is on empowering the farmers through basic digital tools such as smartphone use, social media, agricultural applications, and more complex services like e-commerce. We also enable financial inclusion through Maya, which is PLDT's end-to-end digital payments ecosystem enabler in the country. Through Maya Bank, we aim to make available banking and financial services to millions of underbanked and underserved Filipino consumers and MSMEs. As connectivity opens up a whole new world for users, including access to information, education, livelihood opportunities, and entertainment, there are attendant dangers that we have a responsibility to address. In line with this, we have robust and extensive cybersecurity and data privacy solutions in place as we commit to providing a safe online environment for our customers. Improving human capital is also an area we are focusing on. We're working towards digital inclusion, whether it be providing a safe workplace that embraces diversity or financial inclusion, or combating online child abuse and human trafficking. PLDT and SMART were the first Philippine companies to integrate children's rights into their businesses following a partnership with UNICEF in 2018. This anchors on the recognition that children are among the most active, yet the most vulnerable end-user segments of connectivity and digital services. We are active in the fight to protect children against online sexual abuse and explicit content, or OSAEC. As members of the UK-based Internet Watch Foundation, we've already blocked to date more than 1.3 billion attempts to access OSAEC materials after identifying around 465,000 URLs related to online child abuse. PLDT and SMART were also the first Philippine telcos to sign up as members of the Philippine Business Coalition for Women Empowerment, or PBCW. Established in 2017 as an inaugural project of the Philippine Women's Economic Network and the Australian government's initiative Investing in Women, PBCW leads PBCW efforts towards achieving large-scale organizational transformation. This is done through evidence-based strategies, creating knowledge on best practices in the workplace, communicating the benefits of empowering women in the workforce, and institutionalizing policies based on best practices. Annually, we also celebrate the International Pride Month, and in June 2021, through a campaign entitled PLDT and Smart Pride, #EveryoneIsIncluded, we raised awareness on how to make every individual feel valued and promoted the acceptance of LGBTQIA+ employees and the validation of their life experiences. We also have our Madiscarte Moms PH initiative, which started in 2020 when the COVID pandemic hit. 33% of Filipino women dropped out of the workforce by April 2020, and women in the informal economy were most affected. So PLDT Homes saw this as a chance to provide more entrepreneurial opportunities for women at the safety of their homes. Hence, the Madiscarte Moms PH program was born. Now an online community of 120,000 mompreneurs who want to start, grow, and expand their online home businesses, the community addresses the main pain points for women entrepreneurs, including limited access to technology and skills training, lack of support, and family responsibilities. As we continue to invest in the business, we've started championing ecological efficiency in our operations, reducing environmental impact, fostering stewardship of the environment, and curbing the impacts of climate change on our business, customers, and target communities. Our services, technology, and network will serve not only the growth and development needs of our stakeholders, but it is our ambition that they will also be able to help conserve the country's forests, peatlands, mangroves, and marine protected areas to maintain essential ecosystems that provide immeasurable benefits to everyone. Leveraging on its robust network and digital technology, PLDT pursues shared value programs that aim to foster biodiversity and carbon sequestration in Philippine rainforests, mangroves, marine life, and peatlands. SMART is a pioneer partner for 2 biodiversity management programs: the Connected Mangroves with Ericsson, that's a network vendor, and the Rainforest Connection with Huawei and Rainforest Connection. Both programs utilize connectivity, the Internet of Things, and artificial intelligence solutions to help guard and monitor mangroves and rainforests in the Philippines. Worth mentioning is that we believe that this model of partnership where the telco, network vendors, the government through the DENR, and the local government is a good one, demonstrating that no one can do this alone, but together we can accomplish much. We also have our partnership with the University of the Philippines Marine Science Institute, or UP-MSI, that aims to understand how healthy coastal ecosystems could offset carbon footprint. Research studies of marine protected areas in several parts of the country were undertaken. These studies gathered much needed technical data, which will be key to the conservation, management, and restoration of the MPAs managed by the local government units. PLDT is in discussion with the UPMSI as to how we could create an actual working model using the results of the study. These initiatives also aim to promote industry action and spread awareness on the urgent demand for solutions to slow down possible catastrophic effects of climate change and global warming. As we support net zero by 2050, we're still in the process of creating a roadmap that could help us attain that. We started with crafting a decarbonization roadmap that targets a 40% reduction in our Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions by 2030. This involves initiatives focused on energy efficiency, the use of renewables, the use of green network technology, a refleeting strategy that includes the use of electric vehicles, among others. To underscore our commitment to sustainability, we are including sustainability targets not only in the CEO scorecard, but also as part of everyone's performance targets. Also, we've proposed to earmark a percentage of our telco core income to fund sustainability efforts, thus establishing a tighter link between profit and planet. We recognize the role as a responsible steward of the environment. We use our voice and influence to spur collaboration and action that can spread the message of the much-needed urgency to slow down the possible catastrophic effects of imminent climate change and global warming. Leading the advocacies in corporate governance is a hallmark within the MVP group. We believe that the only way to achieve our goals is through our commitment to the highest standards of business ethics guided by the principles of accountability, integrity, fairness, and transparency. So we ensure 100% compliance with the Data Privacy Act, cybersecurity laws, and similar legislations, rules, and regulations, and meet industry best practices and customer expectations on data protection and digital rights. We also seek to achieve 100% anti-corruption and anti-bribery dissemination in the company and in our value chain. We have Smart Infocast, which is an SMS-based broadcast facility that allows local government units to provide general information, advisories, and announcements to a pool of recipients, as well as get reports and feedback via dedicated access codes. Aside from enabling the delivery of public services by local government units, the service is also being used by law enforcement agencies to get intelligence and information on the ground in aid of peace and order. This measure, along others, ensures our success to be able to ensure business continuity and quality customer experience through safe, secure, and inclusive digital platforms, along with an unwavering focus on sustainable development. With participant status in the United Nations Global Compact, we are committed to support sustainable business practices in line with the 10 principles of the UNGC, which reflect universal sustainable values and cover key areas such as human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption. We're also honored to be part of the NEDA-led Stakeholders Chamber on the Sustainable Development Goals, which aims to create a meaningful impact in the country's journey towards sustainability. Our membership in the Chamber aligns with our commitment to embed sustainability in the business, anchored on our long-standing purpose of connecting and empowering Filipinos everywhere digitally. We've also strengthened our collaborations to make strides in attaining sustainability goals. PLDT is a member of the local chapter of the UNGC, which is the local Global Compact Network Philippines, where PLDT chairs Planet Pillar jointly with Globe Telecom, demonstrating collaboration and shared commitment even among business competitors. We're facing global emergencies like climate change, biodiversity loss, plastic pollution, which require a new way of working together, one that thrives from collaboration, not competition. In the Planet Pillar, membership is more of a strong partnership of like-minded entities that put the planet first, hoping to harness the power of working together as co-stewards of the planet for the next generation. Let me end by saying this: our shared tomorrow is defined by what we do together today. We believe that now is the time for PLDT and SMART to play a more integral role in helping our country achieve sustainable development by connecting the unconnected, bringing connectivity and technology to the underserved and unserved communities, and continually measuring and improving our progress so that we're not only keeping track of the SDGs, but keeping the SDGs on track. This cannot be done alone and requires everyone's help and commitment embedded in the way we think, the way we work, and the way we live. So allow me to end by encouraging everyone to choose hashtag sustainability every day for our children and our children's children.
Thank you so much, Ms. Melissa Vergel P. De Jos, the Chief Sustainability Officer of PLDT Incorporated. Indeed, of course, we would like to congratulate and thank PLDT for being one of the pioneer institutions who started integrating sustainability to their business operations. And it's really great to hear that their four sustainability pillars, which are connection, concern, conservation, and commitment, are aligned to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and to the current sustainability standards here in the Philippines and even outside the Philippines as well. These pillars are highly shown, of course, to their services and their products, wherein they have aligned already to the pillars of sustainability and sustainable development goals. So, of course, let's give again, of course, Ms. De Jos and PLDT Smart for their efforts to integrate sustainability every day. So now, before I go on to the next speaker or to the next panelist, I would like to remind everyone, if we have questions, feel free to put it in the Q&A or in the chat so that later during the open forum, we can already have a smooth flow of question and answer. So now, our next speaker is Miss Rebecca Malay. So Miss Rebecca Malay is a Philippine Rural Reconstruction Movement, PRRM, and a steering committee member of the Coalition for the UN We Need, or C4UN. She's also the Philippine convener of the Philippine Call to Action Against Poverty, or GCAP, a global coalition of civil society organizations campaigning against poverty and inequality, and serve as its former global co-chair. Miss Becky, as she is known to colleagues, is currently active in the advocacy for the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals and is committed to ensure that the voices of those who are left behind are amplified in all platforms open to CSOs and people's organizations. She studied economics at the University of the Philippines and the African Program on Rethinking Development Economics. Everyone, let's welcome Ms. Rebecca Malay.
Thank you very much, Mark. I want to share my screen. Okay. Good afternoon to everybody. Okay, can you see my screen now? Okay,
Yes, po.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening to everybody. My name is Becky Malay. I have three hats today. I work at the Philippine Rural Reconstruction Movement as Development and Development Cooperation and Advocacy Director. And I am the convener of the Global Call to Action Against Poverty in the Philippines. And I work as well in the Asian CSO platform on sustainable development. Okay, APSD is a regional Asian network of platform of civil society organizations in Asia, which are engaged in the effective implementation of the UN 2030 agenda. And then what we do here is we collaborate and coordinate with various organizations all over Asia in pursuing the Sustainable Development Goals and the Agenda 2030. And we are also the regional partner of the Action for Sustainable Development, which is a global CSO umbrella network engaged in the advocacy and campaign of SDGs. No? APSD has members in South Asia, Southeast Asia, Northeast Asia, and Central Asia. In the Philippines, the Global Call to Action Against Poverty, or GCAP, sits as a member of the APSD Steering Committee. GCAP is a global platform of 58 national coalitions in Asia, Africa, Europe, Latin America, and constituency groups from people discriminated by work and descent, and the youth and feminist task forces. So in the Philippines, GCAP is convened by PRM and has been active in the anti-poverty and inequality campaigns since 2005. So we started our work on the MDGs, and now we are pursuing it with the SDGs. No? The PRM, for those who haven't heard of us, we are the oldest non-government development organization in the country. We implement a program called the Sustainable Rural Development Program, and we work in about over 20 provinces on all the SDGs. So we have programs on sustainable agriculture, community-based coastal resource management, sustainable forestry, and the like. No, we work on health, education, livelihood, environment, women's concerns, youth concerns. No? So we have been doing this for 70 years. I'd like to go directly to the challenges that the Philippines is actually facing in terms of the SDGs. We'd like to highlight that poverty and inequality goals number 1 and 10 are very much interrelated and are very much the problem now. We have an increase in the rate of our poverty, in the poverty threshold. The current poverty rate is actually 18%, but it seems that there's much more in terms of magnitude. No? We'd like also to highlight that hunger is a problem. So health is affected by the lack of food, and therefore SDGs 2 and 3 that are interrelated are very much still SDGs which we are lagging behind on. And then it's very important to look at SDG number 8 because we have labor and employment that has been suffering for quite a while because of the lockdowns that affected labor, both formal and informal. No? And climate change definitely is a major issue that the Philippines has to deal with because we are very vulnerable and we rank number 1 in the World Risk Index as of this point. The challenges to the poverty situation based on the preliminary results of the FIES in 2021, the poverty incidence, which is defined as the proportion of Filipinos whose per capita income cannot sufficiently meet the individual basic food and non-food needs. It was recorded, as I said earlier, at 18.1%, translating to around 20 million, 19.99 million Filipinos who live below the poverty threshold of 12,030 a month for a family of 5. If you look at the poverty threshold, obviously this is not sufficient. And the subsistence incidence, defined as the proportion of Filipinos whose income is not enough to meet even just the basic food needs, has actually slightly increased to 5.9% in 2021. It was estimated that the family of 5 needs at least 8,379 per month to meet their basic food requirements. These statistics have been highly contested even by lawmakers in the country, obviously because 8,379 per month is quite low, and it is very difficult really to find some food that will suffice feeding a family of 5 for 8,379 per month, right? So next, if you look at the results, if you look at SDG 8, which I highlighted as a very important issue to deal with, SDG to deal with, labor force participation rate has increased from August 21, if you compare August 2022 and August 2021. Those are initial estimates. And then it looks like there are improvements in terms of employment, but we know that if you look at the figures closely, year on year, the 5 subsectors with the largest increases in the number of employed persons were in wholesale and retail, repair of motor vehicles and motorcycles, accommodation and service activities, administrative and support services, transport and storage, and education. If we look at all these 5 areas, these are services, right? So on the other hand, the top 5 subsectors with the largest decreases in employment are the following: agriculture and forestry, which registered negative 140,000, meaning it decreased by 140,000 individuals. And then fishing and aquaculture, which registered a negative 124,000. Construction, 81,000, manufacturing, 48,000, and information and communication, minus 12,000. These figures are very, very important because these are supposed to be the very backbone of what will feed Filipinos. No? A decline in agriculture and forestry, fishing and aquaculture, construction, manufacturing, and information and communication indicates that those sectors have not been productive for a while because so many displacements in terms of labor have happened. And this is very important, as I said, because these are the productive capacities that will ensure our food production. No? And these are the areas where the poorest people live. No? Agriculture and forestry are in the rural areas, fishing and aquaculture, the same. Construction in urban areas, but the ones that are in the labor force here are mainly informal workers and workers that are paid daily wages. No? So we should look at those figures more closely. According to data compiled by SDSN, the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, based on average performance per SDG, the Philippines ranks 95 out of 163 countries and scores 66 against a regional score of 65.9. So it looks good in terms of performance by indicators. It looks good in terms of the targets, in terms of those indicators that are present and that are being met. It looks good in terms of the data that are available. So while this seems to be a fairly good score based on global rankings, the reality remains that there exists major challenges in policy coherence, governance, and the implementation of programs related to SDGs. They all look good in figures, but in reality, we have to dissect the impacts of the indicators in each of the SDGs. And those SDGs that I have mentioned, SDGs 1, 2, 3, 8, 10, and 13 will have the greatest impacts because right now we are experiencing a lot of, inflation, and this is actually driving the prices of food, which are very important to nutrition and health. And the demand for food has been low only because people have no money to buy. No? So we have to be very critical when the government shows us the data, because the realities of poor people, of those being left behind, are very, very difficult at this point in time. We look at as an organization too, we are part convener, in fact, of the Social Watch Philippines. Social Watch Philippines has been doing shadow reporting since the MDG days. So at this point, we in the 2022, what we decided to do was implement a small survey called People's Scorecard. The People's Scorecard looks at different areas of policy coherence, of the policy environment, the implementation processes, and then it also looks at the transparency and accountability of the government in doing SDG-related policies and programs. No? The dominant mindset of policy players, policymakers, especially those managing at the economic levers is that it is back to business as usual, where the private sector is seen as the main driver of development and the government simply provides the enabling policy environment. So this is not very this is very important, because if you look at the urgent challenges to the new administration, it is actually to promote the realization of our people's economic, social, and political rights. No? So we are talking here of SDGs as rights. No? We should frame the SDGs in the human rights context. It's very important to look at the SDGs with a view to ensure the dignity and the well-being of people and the environment. No? It requires more interventionist activist role for the state. It requires this kind of role, especially in the context where people, especially in agriculture and medium, small, and micro business, are struggling. Citizens have the right to influence and shape policies, activities, and programs of the government through public actions. But our studies show that when this happens, because our studies show that when this happens, development outcomes actually improve. But in the People's Scorecard, we see that in terms of the policy or the legal framework that are available to us, it scores quite high. This is from 1 to 5. And then we have a national action plan, so we scored it at 1.74. This survey was done with CSOs all over the country. And then we look at the implementation at the national level. It scores high. It scores low at 1.58. And then we see that the support from government agencies rank as 1.88. No? So we see the lowest scores in monitoring, evaluation, and reporting, and in transparency and accountability, public awareness and capacity building, and multi-stakeholders partnership. So in other words, when we look at the plans of the government, when it says that the SDG is the framework of the plans, meaning the Philippine Development Plan is anchored on the SDGs and the Ambition 2040, people don't see the processes being open, and people don't see the multi-stakeholder partnerships happening from below, especially at the local level. So we also see that while there is a strong policy or legal framework, meaning that the laws are very good in terms of environment laws, in terms of all these things, the compliance and the implementation of these laws are very much lacking, resulting to a lot of negative results in the achievement of the SDGs. So this is very critical because we want to see the government improve. PRM itself has partnered with a lot of local government units in the Philippines, all over the country. Since 1952, we have not wavered in our partnerships with local governments because we foresee that the best solutions to our problems is through influencing the government in terms of having a very clear sustainable development agenda at the local level. No? But also at the national level, we try to influence very much the policies. So we have been working a lot. We have succeeded in many of our advocacies. But at the same time, we find that the results and the outcomes of our advocacies have been really lacking in terms of good outcomes for people who are left behind. So I think at this point, we should realize that while we face the context of increasing risks from climate and conflict, it is very important that we are able to clarify what our goals are, and that sustainability is not only a goal, it also should be, so should equity be. So important in the Sustainable Development Goals and in the 2030 agenda is actually not only the eradication of poverty, but reduction of all inequalities in all its forms. So it happens everywhere, and it takes the government to be more active and to take that kind of role to lead in terms of not only the policies, but only putting budgets where sustainable development programs should happen. So I will end my presentation on this. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to Ms. Becky Malay for that really comprehensive discussion, particularly, of course, to highlighting various challenges our country is facing in achieving the sustainable development and sustainable development goals in our country. So I believe that it's really important to have collaboration and intervention and also interconnection for us to attain and achieve our commitment to the sustainable development goals. So thank you so much again, Ms. Becky Malay, for that wonderful discussion. So again, just to remind everyone, if we have questions, feel free to already put it in the Q&A panel in our Zoom application or later in our question and answer during the open forum. So now let's proceed with our third speaker, Dr. Philip Arnold P. Tuanyo. So Dr. Randy Tuanyo is currently the Dean and Associate Professor at the Ateneo School of Government. Dr. Tuanyo was also the immediate past coordinator for the Sustainable Development Solutions Network Philippines chapter, a global network of universities and research organizations involved in sustainable development. He's also currently the Vice President of the Philippine Economic Society, the professional organization of economists in the country, and is currently a board member of the following NGOs or non-government organizations. The following NGOs: the Foundation for Media Alternatives, the International Center for Innovation, Transformation and Excellence in Governance, and the Kasagana Ka Mutual Benefit Association. He has also worked in the government as the director of the Macro Policy Unit of the National Anti-Poverty Commission from 2001 to 2004. Everyone, let's give a round of applause to Dr. Randy Tuanyo.
Thank you, Mark. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to this discussion on the roles of the different stakeholders in the SDG. So may I just share my screen? Okay, I think I can share now. So again, I'm making this presentation on behalf of the new Philippine Country Manager of the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, who is Dr. Emma Delocado. Unfortunately, cannot come this afternoon, but hopefully I will be able to describe what the SDS and Philippines has been undertaking in terms of trying to help the country actually achieve its sustainable development goals. So let me discuss briefly what the SDSN is. So in 2012, so we're now 10 years old now, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon actually launched the SDSN actually to mobilize universities in terms of strengthening their role in providing scientific and technological expertise in order to help governments, civil society, business to actually undertake practical problem solving to address the different sustainable development issues. So the network, which is based in New York, supports its member institutions, universities, research institutions, civil society organizations, and other knowledge centers to play a leading role in sustainable development. So we have in the global network, for example, centers working on different issues like on food, on energy, on deforestation, and so on. We also are key partners in problem solving alongside government, business, and civil society. So we hopefully in many countries around the world, we work with civil society organizations, with government to try to pinpoint solutions to different development issues. Our network basically is a university-led network, so we are mainly educators, so we provide education for sustainable development around the world. And also because many of our graduates eventually become social entrepreneurs, we are also social entrepreneurs in the different solutions initiatives. In the Philippines, we were launched in August 2015. We were able to invite the director of the current director, also of the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, Dr. Jeff Sachs, who's the advisor to the UN Secretary General on the SDGs. And we were able to elect our leadership council, and some of them, I think, some of you actually represent these organizations also as well in the 2015 General Assembly. So globally, we can be found all over the world, China and also Argentina are networks that will become into fruition. So we have a mix of national networks, regional networks. So for example, in Southeast Asia, we have also a Southeast Asia regional network. In the Philippines, we have 17 universities to our members, and also a civil society organization. So, and also a research organization as well. So our first members were the International Rice Research Institute, the Mindanao State University, UP Los Baños, Visayas State University, and the Philippine School of Business and Administration. So many of our members are also research centers of different universities, and we're glad to note that there are many members who are also of state universities and colleges who are members of our network. So our goals actually are to undertake a deeper diagnosis and prioritization of sustainable development challenges in the country. So many of us now work in academia. So we try to develop analysis, and one of the outputs that we have undertaken in the past years is developing a sustainable development report, which is launched actually globally each year to assess the state of sustainable development implementation of programs in many countries around the world. We're a platform also for developing development system transformation pathways for key sustainable development sectors. So we encourage our university members, for example, to collaborate with each other and also to identify different sustainable development initiatives. We hope that we can increase also public awareness of the SDG challenges. So we do publish occasionally opinion articles in the press to raise the different sustainable development challenges in the country. We also provide a platform for organizations to share experiences and resources. So we have global platforms where different universities work on specific issues, and also provide sustainable development education at multiple levels, including high school and college. So there is a platform called Sustainable, where we have many online courses, for example, which we offer to different individuals around the world. So there's an education for sustainable development platform, which the global actually network maintains. We strengthen also the means of implementation by monitoring government, academia, and research institutions. So we help try to assist them. We assist them in terms of implementing their sustainable development solutions in different communities. We have also a youth arm that also engages also other youth sectors towards the achievement of SDGs. And we mobilize resources for innovative high potential solution initiatives. So there are resources that we are able to organize in order to fund some of the activities that our university partners actually implement. This slide actually shows the framework that we have. We adapted this from one of the members of the SDSN, the Business for Sustainable Development Network, which shows the 17 SDGs. And all of these are interlinked. So we sort of show a logical framework that trying to address the SDG on watershed and upland ecosystems and coastal marine systems would also address the SDG on water and sanitation, and addressing the SDG on land as well, would address the issue of agriculture and food, and therefore also nutrition. So all of these SDGs are actually interrelated to one another, and the goal actually we hope that our members would also contribute to is eventually to have a sustainable and inclusive economic growth, improve human development index, and improve quality of life for all. And this would be achieved by undertaking all of these SDGs together. So the interventions that we have cluster around 5. So one is on food systems, land, agriculture, and food. The cluster, second cluster on water. We have a working group working on watersheds and upland ecosystems and coastal and marine ecosystems. Cluster 3 would focus on social services, nutrition, health, water, and sanitation, and education. A fourth cluster on built environment and housing, so focusing on materials, energy, industrial systems, and sustainable communities. And a fifth cluster, because we have some associate members who are also members of business organizations that work on SDGs related to decent work, strong institutions, and vulnerable groups. So all of these, in order to achieve the 3 main goals that are listed in the slide. So economic growth, human development, and improved quality of life. So let me just give some sample of some of the activities that the Philippine Network actually has done. So one of the activities that we have undertaken is a funded project to strengthen academe business government partnerships to address the SDGs. And we undertook this in the past 3 years to help our member universities undertake dialogues on sustainability among their different community partners, and bring in also local business also in their discussions. So one of the outputs of these activities, this activity that we had, are multi-sectoral plans on sustainability in areas where our university members are located. So we have one, for example, with Mapua, with their community. They have long partnered with Marinduque and Romblon province. So we have there's also a sustainability plan for Batangas, which are LaSalle University partner member actually undertook with their communities. In Ateneo de Manila, for example, we have undertaken SDG plans with the barangays surrounding the university as well. For SDG 2, so the first cluster of SDGs, now we've worked on trying to push our members to think about food systems. So we know that one of the issues in the country is the food sustainability. And we organized an independent dialogue on food systems starting in 2021, which is actually related to the global conference on food sustainability, which was organized by the United Nations actually last year. So the rationale really is to help to try to identify how universities can help in accelerating reduction of hunger and social inequality, making nutritious foods more accessible, and producing safer foods without adversely affecting people's health and the environment. So, and the interventions that we've taken on this are webinars. So we're focused mainly on education, so on food education and empowered development, on the youth voices and the future of food systems, and revitalizing food systems among different cooperatives in the country. We've also tried to influence the agenda of our national politicians in terms of how they would address their food sustainability agenda, and that's what we did in the first part of the year. And we're continuing our webinars and dialogues, meetings on food sustainability among our different member universities also this year. We also have a project called the ASEAN Green Deal, and this is in coordination with the different national networks in ASEAN. So trying to identify the pathways to net zero emissions among different ASEAN countries. And for the Philippines, the initial study was undertaken by Dr. Toby Monsod with a team from the Institute on Climate and Sustainable Cities, in order to identify how can we lower, how can we achieve that 75% reduction in emissions as we have pledged to the United Nations. And they're continuing projects, research projects on this area also as well. We think that universities are very important in addressing the sustainable development goals, and this is through 4 areas. Now, one, we do universities do a lot of research. So we undertake interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary research innovations and solutions, and hopefully these solutions now will be implemented at the national and local level. And we also help different communities and also businesses strengthen their capacities for research. On education, we have well, at least in the global network, an arm that actually undertakes different webinars on online courses on education for sustainable development. And this is, of course, the role of universities to try to educate its students and the youth on sustainable development issues. And so we have many member universities that are trying to integrate sustainable development into their curriculum. So also identifying the jobs that will actually implement the SDGs and also mobilizing young people. In terms of operations and governance, we believe that universities' operations and governance, we believe that universities have a role. So we're trying to align our operations now with SDGs. So there's a lot of discussion now among different universities, especially because of the Pope's initiative on the Laudato Si, to think about how, for example, universities, education institutions can be made more sustainable in terms of their investments. So where do universities invest their money in? Is it in activities that actually promote the environment or harm the environment? Also on our purchasing decisions that university makes. So what types of goods and services do we actually purchase? So that's one question that we have had in different institutions. Of course, universities are also research organizations are also looked up in terms of public engagement, in terms of the SDGs, to undertake dialogue, to integrate policies, and also demonstrate the sectoral commitment to the SDGs itself. And then, and of course, SDGs matter for universities because they have benefits and opportunities for universities because they increase demand for our education services. If there are more people interested in SDGs, so we can offer more courses in this area. We are also challenged to provide a comprehensive and globally accepted definition of a responsible university. And again, for Catholic institutions, the dicastery of human development of the Vatican has also made pointed out the importance of trying to identify which universities follow the Laudato Si social encyclical of the Pope. So there's a process now of accrediting universities as Laudato Si universities. We offer also framework for demonstrating impact, and also these SDGs also provide universities with new funding streams from philanthropy, also from business, and we are able to support collaboration with UN external and internal partners. And universities, we know that are critical to achieving SDGs because we provide solutions, technologies. We train current and future SDG implementers. We demonstrate on how to support and implement SDGs in our governance, and also our culture. And also we help develop cross-sectoral leadership to guide SDG responses. And if there are any questions, please let us know. You can contact us, the SDSN Philippine Network, at the Ateneo de Manila University. Our email is listed, and globally, we have offices in both in France, Paris, and also New York. So, maraming salamat.
Thank you so much, of course, Dr. Randy Tuanyo, for highlighting, of course, SDSN's important contribution to involve different universities, businesses, and even the youth like us to be more intertwined and to be more committed in achieving and contributing to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. I myself has really seen SDSN's contribution to sustainable development, particularly since I'm connected with the SDSN Youth Philippines. So thank you so much for your contributions to, of course, to the sustainable development goals here in the Philippines. Last but not the least, of course, we have Honorable Alfredo Coro II, So, Honorable Alfredo Matugas Coro II served as the municipal mayor of Del Carmen in Siargao Islands for 9 years and 3 years as vice mayor, and now currently back as its municipal mayor. The transformation of the municipality of Del Carmen in Siargao Islands with an environmentally balanced and community-based development approach has been recognized by various national and international organizations. Honorable Coro II is a father first and a public servant. So I think we have a video to show the message of or to show the presentation of Honorable Alfredo Coro II.
Greetings to the University of the Philippines, CIFAL Philippines, participants of the forum, fellow presenters, ladies and gentlemen. Marajaw na adlaw sa ato tanan and happy United Nations Day. I am Alfredo M. Coro II, currently the mayor of the municipality of Del Carmen and your storyteller for our UN Day Online Forum 2022. The presentation will be about achieving sustainable development goals in the local government, the Del Carmen experience. Thank you for the opportunity to share our experience in the local governance of the SDGs. Before we formally begin, let me welcome you first to our home, one of the 2021 World's Greatest Places by Time and the 2021 #1 island in Asia by Condé Nast, Siargao. Siargao is also a protected landscapes and seascapes under the RA E-NIPAS Act of 2018. Del Carmen, our municipality, is a 5th-class municipality and one of the 9 municipalities in Siargao Islands. We host the largest contiguous mangrove forest in the Philippines at almost 5,000 hectares and with a 44,000-hectare municipal waters to manage. On December 16, 2021, Super Typhoon Rai and the Philippine Super Typhoon Odette made landfall and devastated our island of Siargao. Storm surge were as high as 6 meters and destroyed our home, our livelihood, and our dreams. This climate extreme weather event was exacerbated by our ongoing issues with the COVID pandemic. Yet, we persevered and moved forward to ensure that no one is left behind. Allow me now to share our programs and policies in ensuring that we can sustain to meet the Sustainable Development Goals despite the pandemic and a super typhoon. All of these programs were co-created with the community and our partners. SDG number 1, no poverty. While we are still far from this target, we were able to reduce poverty from 69.9% in 2010 to 37.2% by 2019, with a 31.7% drop. SDG number 2, Zero Hunger. Malnourishment dropped from 26% from 2009 to less than 3% as of 2022. During the pandemic and super typhoon, our first agenda was to ensure consistent and sustainable access to food, leading to no hunger and resulting to 0% crimes related to hunger. SDG number 3, Good Health and Well-Being. LG Del Carmen runs the Seal of Health Governance program focused on strengthening health leadership in the barangay, which gave the community confidence to address localized health issues and related social determinants. Our approach has been replicated in many other municipalities in the Philippines and was recognized overseas as a social innovation for health. SDG number 4, Quality Education. Education being a non-devolved function of the LGU, we still push to establish an education quality improvement program focused on reading and numeracy literacy and comprehension. During the pandemic, our localized evaluation of the modular pedagogy showed evidence to support immediate intervention necessary in all the 9 municipalities of Siargao, mitigating drastic loss in learning and in the child's interest to learn. SDG number 5, Gender Equality. Del Carmen supports the LGBTQIA rights, and we are pushing for the establishment of women-led enterprises such as the garments and processed food industries. SDG number 6, Clean Water and Sanitation. We took the opportunity to establish water filter stations in 5 strategic locations in the mainland of Del Carmen to support the 16 barangays and working on a better technology setup to have the same access to water for island communities. The state of the water of Del Carmen is currently our focus, with efforts on addressing access to potable drinking water becoming our top priority. SDG number 7, Affordable and Clean Energy. We are looking on an EU-funded project to provide a 24/7 electricity in our last mile community in Halian Island, with a population of almost 1,000. We are looking forward to the Lights On activity in the first week of December 2022. SDG number 8, Decent Work and Economic Growth. We developed a tourism industry and capitalized on our biggest asset, the mangrove forest and the vast municipal waters. Our Nowhere to Cover story boasted of boat tours who were previously illegal fishers and illegal mangrove cutters, and a community-based tourism program employing at least 1,000 families on a rotational basis. The new economic activity generated jobs and encouraged entrepreneurs. Pre-COVID, with 146 plus boat operators for the mangrove tours, 150% increase in business permits for homestays, transport, and restaurants, an average of 900 visitors a day. SDG number 9, Industry, Innovation, and Infrastructure. LG Del Carmen pushed to establish the ICT industry as a complementary industry in 2016 and are finally getting the results of all our efforts. The presence of fiber optic cable will increase ICT investments and digital nomad locators to Siargao. SDG number 10, Reduced Inequalities. We focus our efforts on fisher folks, being the poorest of our community, to be given access to social protection we all have, including SSS, Health, Pag-ibig, Red Cross Insurance, etc. Currently, we are expanding the program to the whole of Siargao, benefiting the 9 municipalities with support from various partners in development. SDG number 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities. We championed the mangrove management of the largest contiguous mangrove forest in the Philippines to shield us from storm surges, typhoons, and other potential calamities, as proven by the mitigated impact of Super Typhoon Odette. I would often say we invested 10 years to battle a 4-hour typhoon. SDG number 12, Responsible Consumption and Production. LG Del Carmen legislated a community farms program to set up in all barangays, allowing immediate access to vegetable. There is really no food wastage in the island, even during fiesta season, when much food is prepared. SDG number 13, Climate Action. In funding support from the People's Survival Fund, established the Siargao Climate Field School for farmers and fisher folks to develop and share process and technology for the frontliners of our food security. As the facility was heavily damaged by Super Typhoon Odette, we're still waiting for additional funding for the rehabilitation from the People's Survival Fund. We're aiming to start the program from mid-2023 and turnover of operations with the Surigao del Norte State University by 2024. SDG number 14, Life Below Water. To improve management of life below water, established and sustained our marine protected areas. Our gratitude goes to CCAT, RARE, DNR, and BFAR for guiding us in the process. Prior to Super Typhoon Odette, the growth of both hard and soft corals have been observed, inviting more fish species to return to our area. The Del Carmen Marine Protected Areas are in 4 barangays: Taub, San Fernando, Halian, and Cabugao. SDG number 15, Life on Land. The management of the life on land in our perspective is about having appropriate land use plans to ensure an ecosystems-based adaptation model for development. We have our key documents approved and are now completing all plan documents required from the local government. SDG 16, Peace, Justice, and Strong Institutions. This is all captured by good governance of the local government, which is now ably audited under the seal of good local governance, of which Del Carmen has regularly complied. Good governance will result in strong institutions and outstanding services, leading to peace and justice. SDG number 17. Partnership of the goals with co-ownership. We brought the multi-stakeholders for several discussions using various platforms, and are coming together, Kambayayong in our dialect, allowed us to effectively and efficiently discuss how we can link science, innovation, policy management, and behavior to be able to manage and govern our municipality and achieving our targets for the SDGs. In closing, with the median age of the Philippines at 23 years old, we are revising the strategy to focus on the youth of Del Carmen, how to get them ready to lead our community by the time they are 23 with the SDG targets as our desired outcomes. I call therefore all local governments to review and define the plans and programs towards achieving SDG targets, and collectively, we should be able to meet the goals of 2030. Thank you very much again for the opportunity to share our story, and we hope you join us in our journey to recovery from Super Typhoon Odette and the pandemic. Please stay safe, wear face mask, and get vaccinated. Salamat Karajaw sa Ijo Purot!
There, thank you so much. Of course, salamat Karajao to Honorable Alfredo Coro II for that really, really insightful and really comprehensive plans of how is the municipality of Del Carmen in Siargao is able to localize the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Before I go on to the open forum, since Honorable Coro is also here live, do you want to add more before we proceed to the open forum?
No, I'd just like to say thank you to everyone for the invitation, and especially to the UN. Thank you for supporting Siargao during our darkest moments. Most of the programs just completed last week, and with that, we are now in early recovery phase. Salamat Karajaw.
There, thank you so much, of course. And thank you so much as well to our partners and collaborators who have helped, of course, the municipality of Del Carmen and Siargao to help them recover from the effects of Typhoon Odette, and also, of course, hopefully anticipate future potential disasters like what happened last year, so it would not happen again. So now, again, thank you so much to all of our esteemed speakers for sharing their insights and representing the various sectors that are currently engaged with and strive towards a sustainable society and a future for all. So now we proceed to the open forum. The floor is now open for your questions, comments, and reactions. Please put them in the Q&A box in the Zoom moderated by our UP-CIFAL team. So we have, again, Honorable Alfredo Coro, the Mayor of Del Carmen in Siargao, Dr. Randy Tuaño from Ateneo School of Government and former Country Manager of Sustainable Development Solutions Network Philippines, Ms. Melissa Vergel de Jos from PLDT Incorporated, and Ms. Becky Malay from Asia Civil Society Partnership for Sustainable Development. So I think we have questions already, but I think that the people have already, some of our panelists have already answered some of the questions. But I guess just to start, this is related to Dr. Tuaño. Will your organization add social and solidarity economy concept? Dr. Randy?
Yes, thank you, Mark, for the question. I think that's from Ms. Babes de Shorda. Well, certainly, parang integrated into the different SDGs, no, are, well, the issue also of the trying to address also the issues of the marginalized and vulnerable. So, and that's hopefully what we want to address. For example, in the discussions, no, that we have in food sustainability, no, one of the points that we have had that the universities have discussed, no, how do we make food more affordable, no, especially for the vulnerable sectors, and also how do we create jobs and employment. So that issue, the concept of solidarity economy, no, is integrated much, no, in the work that actually the network
Yes,
does.
I agree. I think solidarity economy is really important for us to ensure sustainability in the things that we do. So thank you so much, Dr. Randy Tonyo, for answering that question. Next, I think this is an insight from Beneferl Bongolan. Congratulations, Mayor Coro. I think NEDA should be asking the local government units regarding the study of SDG target interactions complementary to monitoring progress. So I think it's really important for us to have localization, particularly this is really one of the main highlights and even one of the main actions being asked by the United Nations to strengthen the localization. I think it's really evident from the presentations, particularly from Honorable Coro, Mayor Coro and Dr. Randy, that localization is really important. And it's really, of course, we need the help as well of the private sector, which is, of course, represented by Ms. De Jos, and even the help of our civil society sector, which is represented by Ms. Becky Malay. So any more questions from our audience? I think there's a question in the chat room. So from Maria Cecilia Medina, Ms. Cecilia Medina, what would be some of the best practices on sustainability assisting indigenous community that are very vulnerable and marginalized? I think I would like to start first with Honorable Mayor Coro, because I believe there's also some indigenous communities in their island as well, if I'm not mistaken po.
First, I'd like to clarify we don't have IPs in Siargao.
Sorry.
The IPs we have are the white folks who are surfing in the island, opted to live there. So in terms of any community that we move into, be it fisher folks, farmers, indigenous communities, the bottom line is that you have to be with them. You do a deep dive, you talk to them, you understand them, and try to explain also. You bring your own assets, which is basically data, as Dr. Randis mentioned. There's a lot of information that are available, but they're not communicated in a manner that specific communities would appreciate and understand. If you present a lot of facts, to an IP community, even to a fisherman, they would not understand the value of that data for them. So it has to be translated in a manner that they can appreciate, and therefore they will be willing to engage with you in the process of developing solutions that they themselves already know. It's just a matter of being confident to say that this is the way we want things to happen. And we have to give them that platform. So I think that's where the issues have been arising in many discussions with local governments and national governments, and even the various civil society programs are. It's really the engagement and the communication aspect between the sector that you want to support and the programs that you want to push. Because in the end, it is them that will be staying in the community. And when you leave with your intervention, what will happen to that intervention if it was never embraced from the very beginning, because there was already a gap in communication. So, that's just from our experience, that's how we were able to transform a lot of our fisher folks that were very engaged in illegal activities. It takes a while, it takes a lot of patience, but in the end, it's very worth it.
Yes. I agree with Mayor Coro. Communication and collaboration are really important for us to integrate and to intertwine with other sectors as well. Let's go to Ms. De Jos.
Yeah, in the case of PLDT, we when we roll out our networks, we often go through IP communities. And so effectively what we need to be able to do is to educate our own people, our network people, but not only that, also our contractors, because in some cases the work that's done for us are done by our contractors, and they have to be very sensitive about what are how to deal with the IP communities. And I think the reason why we also introduce parang sensitivity training to our IP, to our contractors, is that when the contractors' work is done, the one that's left behind is PLDT. It's our reputation, it's our network. So it's very important that all people who deal with the IP communities are very sensitive to their needs and their culture and what the rules, things like that. Now, one of the things we do for our IP communities is what we mentioned earlier, the School in a Bag project. Maybe to describe the School in a Bag, it's really it's a kit that has tablets, it has a modem, it has a SIM card, it allows connectivity. So parang it's introducing education to communities that would not have been reached normally by, sort of standard network cell sites and all. And this is very important because what we want to be able to do is not only pass through the community and be sensitive to their needs, but also help them develop. So those are some of the things we do, and it really includes expanding the engagement, not only with the PLDT organization, but also the contractors who work for us.
Thank you so much with that answer po, Ms. Tejos. Do we have any inputs po from Dr. Randy and Ms. Becky about the question on best practices on sustainability that assists indigenous communities, as well as the marginalized and vulnerable?
Okay, I can speak to that question. PRM has been in Ifugao for a long, long time. It was in the early 90s, late 80s, around 1989, when we did community organizing in Ifugao. We implemented programs on upland, sustainable agriculture. We implemented renewable energy programs in the areas, in different towns, Honduan, and all of those and those projects are still existing up to now. We even have an eco-development tourism program that is now run by the community. PRM strategy is actually organize the basic sectors, the most dominant, poorest classes. And then when they have been organized, we leave them. No, we are not supposed to stay with them until the end of time. PRM actually gets out. We have a withdrawal phase, but it was a 15-year program that we implemented on sustainable development in the area. And this actually included political empowerment. And what we did was really to help them participate in the local development councils, in barangay elections, because barangay elections are supposed to be non-partisan. So we were able to promote the kind of good governance for sustainable development program in those areas of indigenous peoples. So it was not only in Ifugao that we did this. The current Save the Ifugao Terraces movement is actually the local movement of PRM in Ifugao, but also we have areas in Baao, in Camarines Sur, and in Cotabato. We also have areas in Bataan that have implemented programs on IPs. So that's what we have done. No?
Thank you so much, Miss Becky. And it's really nice, of course. I think there are more and more organizations are collaborating with either barangays or even local governments or even private partners to do necessary actions to marginalize and IPs. Dr. Randy, do you have something to add before we proceed with the next question?
Yes, well, some of our member universities have partner IP communities, and we've encouraged them to undertake dialogues, and especially because we know that some of the innovations or interventions that our member universities can undertake would affect the IP sector. So in the consultations, I believe that, for example, in the ones that Papua, for example, undertook with Romblon and Marinduque, the interventions that the IP communities have requested are related to livelihoods, so in non-timber forest, in producing non-timber forest products, and so there are plans that that part of them are done also by faculty members that can help some of these IP communities in their areas. So livelihood programs are the ones that I remember that are issues that of IP communities that are being addressed by our university.
Thanks so much, Dr. Randy, for that. And now we proceed with the next question. I think we have a few more questions before we end. Maybe one or two can answer na lang po para we can tackle as much as possible. Next is from Maria Dulce Alibangbang. How should poverty and hunger be treated or mitigated in urban areas? Anyone from the group po?
Maybe I'll share something that we just
No worries po.
inaugurated. Yeah, I'll share something that we inaugurated the other day. I think just last week. It's what we call Plant Smart Grow Hub. So effectively, it's a 40 square meter greenhouse on top of one of our buildings along Ayala, where we effectively use hydroponics to plant very short gestation crops, and effectively the ones that take care of that garden are our maintenance crew, and whatever we are able to sell the crops for, parang we share with them. And it, in effect, when we inaugurated that, we had a farmer from San Ildefonso, Bulacan, diba? What it was very touching that when he saw what we were able to achieve with 40 square meters, he went away saying, itatry daw niya yan sa kanyang lugar, di ba? Sabi niya, it doesn't take naman pala so much land to be able to plant. And parang very short cycle plants, like that one was lettuce, di ba? 25 days. Within that short amount of period, he can turn around. It's effectively like a cash crop, doesn't take too much land, doesn't take too much resources. And so he said, pag nag-succeed yun, I am going to encourage my kababayans there in San Ildefonso to do the same thing. So I think it's not one big step sometimes, it's little steps like that. But what we have to be able to do is make that information known and available so that people can do it. So 40 square meters, they say you can buy a small hydroponics kit on Shopee daw, kasi diba parang what are you doing at home? What can you do at home? So maybe it's little small steps like that. And it's just a question of scaling that up, but really simple, and maybe grow enough quantity lang for your own use. In some cases, it supplements maybe the farmer's income, parang ganon. And then the local government of Makati sent representatives and basically said, if we do this in all the buildings along the CBD, imagine how much produce we can make. And I guess that leads to addressing hunger, maybe not in its entirety, but a little at a time. So I thought it was very interesting to share that.
Yes, it's really an interesting thought, especially now that we have technology, of course, technology and connectivity for us to have more information on these technologies and innovations. Of course, thank you so much as well for PLDT for being one of the major players in ensuring that there is connectivity and connection and information that is being transmitted to people as well. So anyone pa po who wants to add before we have the final question?
Yeah, may I add lang po, sir?
No worries.
Hello?
No worries po. Go ahead, Mayor.
Okay. I think we have to look into the bigger picture, because there's a very big relationship between rural and urban, and the desire of most rural to become urban. And if that's not resolved, then it will be very difficult to really address hunger in urban, because everybody's trying to make a lot of buildings, not understanding the relationship of the rural to the urban. For example, as an archipelago, we are mostly built up of islands. And if we're talking about Luzon and Mindanao, the bigger islands, then of course the logistics of trying to plant, then deliver the plant towards specific market areas are already established. But if you're looking to integrate the other outlying 7,000 or 6,000 islands of the archipelago, that becomes a challenge in how we will be integrating and addressing hunger in urban areas, because a lot of our supply, especially for proteins of coming from marine and the fishery sector, are coming from these islands. So we have to look at the issue as a whole, and it's been a challenge, especially for communities like ours that are on an island, and a geographically isolated island. How do you now mitigate the transport of these goods so that it becomes accessible in urban areas at an acceptable price, so that urban dwellers can happily access this food? And these issues of commodity management between rural and urban is something that I think we should have more discussions of. And I think innovators like PLDT, the universities and NGOs should start looking into these integrations of the different rural communities, how islands and uplands can supply so that there will be interest in both rural and urban, to stay rural so that there's enough food to supply to the urban. And for urban dwellers to have enough capacity, your capacity to buy, to purchase the type of food to ensure that you will not be hungry. So there's a lot of debate right now between local governments of how we will actually plan out our developmental platforms in addressing all these SDGs. One of the key things really is no hunger, and I think that's a discussion point that we may want to start tackling upon, because it's one of the only, I think the only way to address really hunger in urban areas, aside from, of course, innovations being done and shared by PLDT.
Yes, thank you so much, Mayor Coro. I really think you have a great thought on that, especially we are connected and related with each other. And we hope that, of course, our private sector, our NGO sector, and the government sector can find potential intersections for us to do these actions both in rural and urban areas. So now for the final question, I think we have a final question here. So this is from an anonymous attendee. So how did you raise awareness on gender equality to your community or institution? What would be some of the best practices to have a safe, gender fair, and gender sensitive community, aside from conducting gender sensitive orientations to them? I think this is really a great question, because sometimes some people might just be limited on conducting gender sensitivity programs or orientations. Maybe we have some practices that we have been doing that we might want to share before we end the program or the session. Anyone po who wants to start the discussion?
I can do that, Mark.
Yes po. Go ahead po, Becky.
So thank you for the question. We have been doing the trainings on gender sensitivity. We have been organizing women, especially rural women, because they're the most left behind, as we all know. They have done their own programs. They're actually federated at the national level. They're actually leaders of the PKKK, the national leadership of women in the rural areas. So I think we've gone far in terms of being able to empower these women to come out and as leaders, no. But one of the programs that recently we have done after Yolanda was to recognize care work, no, because care work is not actually being compensated. There is no value given to care work except for care. So it's not monetized. So in our program in summer, we have decided that care work should be recognized, and we have gone into a lot of advocacy in terms of trying to find the best way to recognize care work in policies and in legislations, be it at the local or the national level. We work with Oxfam on this.
Okay, thanks so much. And yeah, I think it's really important to train and to connect with rural women, especially, of course, there are some issues that are not being heard that is happening and occurring in their areas, and even until now. Aside from that, anyone who wants to share their gender sensitive or gender oriented practices? Dr. Randy, go ahead po.
Well, although admittedly we haven't tackled gender, no, as a network concern, no, but we know that in many of our members, no, the thinking is how do we now integrate gender policies, no, and gender measures, no, in the way that we operate, no. So, for example, in the quality assurance, no, of different universities, no, so looking at issues like in equality of pay, for example, the availability of facilities, no, for women, no, in our own institutions are now being assessed. So, and these are important indicators, especially well, although we really want to move away from rankings, but in some sense, some of the ranking systems around the world also try to measure these aspects. The availability of services for women, the policies that are present in education institutions for women, the proportion, for example, of faculty that are being hired, and also the pay, are certainly some of the things that the universities actually look into.
Okay, thank you so much po, Dr. Randy. Mayor Coro, Ms. Dejos, do you want to add anything po before we close the session?
Maybe for PLDT, I just wanted to share maybe from the corporate perspective, diba? It's not only in the organization where you want to give equal chance to women. In the case of PLDT, that goes all the way up to the board. What we want to be able to do is throughout the organization, all the way up to the board, women have equal opportunities. So the good news is the last addition we had to the PLDT board membership was actually female. She's actually from the Ateneo, very young. She's female, very active, and quite a good addition to our board. And I think what that really means is that we are saying that women have a place in the organization, not only at the lower levels, not only at in our MANCOM, the direct reports to the president are mainly women. So I think at PLDT, diversity and gender equality, I think, is prime most in our thought. Maybe the issue then is something we're looking at, which Dr. Randy mentioned, equal pay, right, for women. So it's something that is brought to the consciousness. Maybe it's not yet perfect, but I think a lot of thought is being given into giving equal opportunity. And it's not only women and men, right? It's the LGBTQIA plus community, and basically highlighting the fact that because of diversity, sometimes you get more than if you were just purely male, purely female. It's really everybody coming together, regardless of who you are. And what's important is ideas. It's not what you put in the gender box when you put in an application. It's your thoughts, it's your ideas that will contribute at the end of the day. So I think PLDT work in progress, but I think happy about the progress that's already being made.
Yes, and of course, it's really great to have progress year after year, and especially injecting it with youthful minds who have been also trying to demand more diversity, equity, and inclusion in both workspaces, schools, NGOs, and even in government. So last but not the least, Mayor Corio, I think wants to share something as well.
Yeah, just a few thoughts. I think if you talk about pay, I think in government it's very standard already, regardless of who you are, as long as you're in the position. And if you're talking about elective positions, then that's really elective. So if you're elected, then there's no question about that. But I think the idea of gender equality in local governments is really in the opportunities of the lower sector. I mean, we have to understand that it's very different if you're talking to a fisher folk family in a farming community, and how they view the role of women in that society. That's why we are focusing on. There's a lot of focus on the local governments for women-led enterprises. How do the LGBTQA fit in the business community? What types of industries can be supported to maximize their talents and their interests? Yeah, it's not just looking into what the big is, but we have to look really in if specifically in rural and even urban poor. It's the same issue. It's really the role of women in that society. So to also minimize, we have to be sensitive, because you also have to minimize impact of, if there's too much campaign on women, it might lead to gender violence, and there's a lot of connection on that aspect. So essentially, if we do a lot of campaign and support, there has to be balanced communication for everyone to understand the different roles in the family and in the community and the society. In doing so, I think everybody can benefit from achieving yung target that the one we're discussing, that no one will really be left behind.
Yeah, again, thank you so much for that, Mayor Coro, and it's really important to have gender-sensitive policies and initiatives as well. Thank you so much, and congratulations, of course, to all of our panelists for a really well thought and really comprehensive discussion on our topic, which is focusing on the, of course, stakeholders for sustainable development. Let's give them a warm round of applause for a really insightful and really thoughtful discussion for this afternoon. So that ends our Q&A session. If we have more questions to them, I know we still have more questions, or if you want to collaborate with them, maybe I would like to request our panelists to comment down their emails as well for potential collaborations or for potential future questions as well. Again, thank you so much, and allow me to turn it back to our host for today, Miss Danielle Arnisto.
Thank you very much, Mr. Marcasinto, as well as to our speakers, Ms. Verhel de Jos, Dr. Randy, Ms. Becky, and Mayor Coro. We really appreciate your organizational individual efforts in pushing for sustainable development. Truly, our efforts today will impact and benefit the future generations. With that, kindly allow me to introduce Ms. Alab Airoso to give the message from the youth. Ms. Alab Airoso is a climate justice activist in the Philippines. She is a convener and current national coordinator of Youth Advocates for Climate Action Philippines, or YACAP, the Fridays for Future of the Philippines. May Alab, you may give your short message.
Hello, good afternoon. Thanks, Danny, for the introduction. I won't keep everyone long. So good afternoon. I am Alab once again, and I'm the National Coordinator of YACAP, or the FFF of the Philippines. I'd like to thank the organizers for including the youth, thinking of us, and congratulate you for a successful event. And I'd also like to acknowledge the speakers who spoke about the progress and the stakeholders of our sustainable development goals and what needs to be done. Your words have inspired us to continue on the fight, and we're happy that we're able to stand together with you for our fight for climate justice and sustainable development. When we talk about climate justice, we're talking about what is at stake for us and the future we are facing. For context, YACAP is a nationwide alliance of youth organizations, individuals, student councils that advocate for immediate global climate action led by the youth. The youth's role in sustainable development is direct action. We may be young, but it is in the interest of the youth to be immersed with the communities, to learn from the stakeholders themselves. What we do in YACAP is towards the goal to engage as much of the youths as possible from all sectors for our campaign for climate justice. So what we do are climate strikes, we have our integrations, discussions, consultations, and there we learn from the stakeholders and the communities themselves. And there we learn about their struggles, about hunger, health, disaster, and the inequalities they're facing. In YACAP, we have 5 points of unity: climate justice, urgent climate action, youth-led collective action, defending our environmental defenders, and system change. Those 5 points, I believe that our goals for sustainable development match these points. We can't talk about climate justice without talking about inequalities. We recognize that the ongoing climate crisis, if not averted, will lead to global catastrophe and must be urgently addressed. Therefore, it's imperative to demand justice for climate, as well as take action to resolve the gut problems of the communities along with it. We can't talk about climate justice without talking about social justice. For urgent climate action, it is already a goal in within itself. We recognize the urgency of climate action based on the science and the need for informing and organizing the youth to lead the global action against the climate crisis. With the Philippines ranking as one of the most vulnerable places on Earth impacted by climate change, it's imperative for us to declare a climate emergency as defined by the people and to have concrete plans at addressing the current and the possible effects of this climate crisis. As a youth alliance, we aim to unite the broadest sector of the youth, and the youth will inherit the planet, but we refuse to inherit a dead planet. In this regard, there is a need to mobilize and collectively sound the alarm to demand justice for people and the earth. The historical victories of collective action have proven the need for the Filipino youth to stand united with a multi-sectoral, intergenerational struggle for the survival of our species, and that's what we're doing now, talking about the progress we've done and the things that we need to do. We can only do this if our call for climate justice includes the justice for those in the front lines of our communities and for the fight for our planet. The fifth point, however, serves as a challenge for everyone. How do we change a system that created these inequalities, the exploitation, the continuous emissions due to how it was built? How do we shift from a profit-oriented, wasteful system with the goal of only maximum profit into a system that would ensure that every single person is given the right to eat, to be housed, and to live? That is a question I hope we can answer on our own, but also we collectively take action. We can't be satisfied with how things are now. We must take action. We must listen to communities, create the solution based on their terms, and make sure that no one's left behind. I recognize that there is still a long way to go for us to reach our goals, but I believe that together we can prevent further global degradation and to create a world that is pro-environment, pro-people, planned, needs-based, and it's a world that the youth wants to see, and we can't achieve it without youth. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Alab. And as part of the youth, we indeed have a huge role in achieving sustainable development. And so to commemorate our efforts here today, we encourage the youth to join us in taking the pledge to reaffirm our efforts and commitment to the sustainable development. Ms. Alab?
All right, everyone, if we're ready to take the pledge, we can bring our right hand up. But however, all right, we can start. We, the young people, pledge to continue to champion and to sustain development bequeathed to us
by
the community,
the
different stakeholders and sectors, and by the UN entities, now and in the coming years. Our work and conduct shall reflect the commitment to a sustainable future, to leave no one behind, and to reach the furthest first, as we fulfill our social and professional obligations, and serve the community, the country, and the world. We will endeavor to advocate to sustain development and to make the world a better place. We will continue to champion the sustainable development goals. Yay!
Thank you, Ms. Alab, and thank you, everyone. I hope everyone's mission, vision, and goal for a sustainable future is rejuvenated from our pledge. So to formally close our online forum, we have Mr. Gustavo Gonzalez, the UN Resident Coordinator to the Philippines, to give us his closing remarks.
Just 3 days ago, we marked the 77th anniversary of the United Nations. And in the Philippines, we celebrated a long-standing partnership that is built on commitment to human rights obligations, the protection of migrants, disaster resilience, peace in the Bangsamoro, among others development priorities. And in his speech to the UN General Assembly, as you remember, the President of the Philippines acknowledged the continuing need for a transformative development agenda. He said that the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development is, in fact, a platform for unity where our societies can build a future that is resilient and inclusive, where our people can be healthy, happy, and secure. But at the same time, the Philippines recognized that the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals has been significantly derailed by a number of challenges. And you know all of them. The COVID-19 pandemic, the war in Ukraine, and the climate change situation, all of them are major incidents affecting any development trajectory. The Philippines Statistical Authority has reported that 13 SDG targets that have been previously on track have regressed in 2022. These targets are for ensuring food security, the equal access to education, better management of water resources, economic growth and decent works, resilience to disasters, and violence against women and girls, among others. What we learn is that the magnitude and the nature of SDG challenges require for alliances, for a collective response. So this is the time for coalitions and multilateralism. And the UN was made for moments like this. In the case of the Philippines, the UN country team embarked very recently on an initiative called Integrated National Financial Framework, and this joint program represents our cutting-edge investment to support the country to accelerate the SDGs achievement. And the idea is working with national government partners to integrate the SDGs in budget planning on the way we allocate resources. And what we are learning from this process is, number one, there is a need for greater integration among the stakeholders in planning and financing. And this means, amongst others, enhancing the sustainable finance roadmap to cover not just a number, but all the SDGs. Because the SDGs, all of them, they are interrelated. It also calls for mobilizing resources for SDGs financing. For example, by aligning the use of additional resources from Mandana's ruling and other locally generated resources with relevant SDGs and targets. Number two, we must promote synergy of policies across the public and private sector. This will necessitate providing incentives for the private sector, capacity building for tracking indicators of SDGs contributions, and for using SDGs impact standards and regular monitoring, review and evaluation of the effectiveness of the SDGs program's investment. Because we cannot transform what we cannot measure. Number three, we need to reinforce collaboration across the public and private sector through regular government-led policy dialogues and knowledge exchange, amongst others. As we know, the SDGs are the blueprint for everyone's aspiration for peace and prosperity for people and the planet, now and into the future. I will end my message by quoting the Secretary General when he said, "The United Nations is the product of hope. Let us renew our hope and conviction in what humanity can achieve when we work as one, in global solidarity." Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gustavo Gonzalez, and thank you everyone for joining us today. To keep up with the future UP-CIFAL Philippines events and capacity building activities, you may follow us in our respective social media pages sent in the chat box. So once again, thank you very much, and let us continue our mission in achieving sustainable development so that no one is left behind. Thank you.